The moment Pangea falls is the moment that all wanderers will lose their powers. This will be your punishment for not rising to the challenge. This declaration sent a ripple to the worlds of Solterra and Pangea, and all the wanderers heard the voice of the omnipotent being that governed them all. Most of the wanderers in the world were doing their best to protect their homeworld from the invaders. However, those at the top, with the exception of a select few, were only putting in a half-hearted effort. There was no doubt that they also planned to do the same at the Signy continent. They would wreak havoc against the Djinns and Magians who were rank 7 and below, but play it safe against the rank 8 sovereigns who would usually appear before the rank 9 monsters arrive from the Dimensional Gate. These people, of course, were none other than the thrones and monarchs of Pangea. Only a select few among them, like Arthur, Lawrence, and Tristan, were genuinely fighting to protect their world from the Djinn invasion. But the ultimatum of the One made them realize that their plans of expansion in the world of Solterra would all come to naught if their home world was taken over by the Djinns and Magians. They were only able to keep their kingdoms and major cities because they had the power to protect them. But the moment they lost their powers, their neighbors would not hesitate to launch an expedition to take over their territories. 13, who was the root of it all, stood at the center of the conference room of the Dvalan Federation and gave everyone the see, "I told you so" stare, which almost made everyone's faces turn pale. The teenage boy knew that it was the perfect time to strike, now that the iron was still hot. "The One will not accept or tolerate failure," 13 said firmly. "He gave us powers for a reason, and he will not hesitate to take them back if he finds us unworthy of it. Like I said earlier, whatever restrictions I have right now will be the same ones you will have if Pangea falls. So, you guys better put more effort into this counterattack and show the One that you guys are doing what he wanted you to do." 13 smiled faintly before tapping his communicator, reverting the projection to its previous state, showing the map of the Rigel continent. "Our operation will start in 3 weeks," 13 stated as he looked at Trevor Remington, Morris Smith, and Stephen Lockwood. "I hope by that time, the forces from Aldebaran would have their naval fleet and elite warriors at the ready." The leaders of the Aldebaran continent nodded their heads in understanding. 3 weeks was enough for their forces to travel to the Rigel continent and help with the liberation mission that Zion Levinas would be spearheading. 13 then continued to explain the things that they needed in order to guarantee their success, specifying even the logistics and the position each army would take during the battle. Lawrence was tempted to bring the rest of the hero party to the Rigel continent, but he decided to not do it in the end. Right now, the lower-tiered gates were about to open in the Signy continent, and the hero party was needed there to raise morale. As such, he would have to make do with the current forces they had there, which 13 confirmed was already enough to reclaim the Birdman's territory. After their discussion ended, 13 said that he and the Leventis family fleet would scout the southeast regions of the Rigel continent to scout the movements of the Earth Dragons, as well as the other kings. Of course, that was just an excuse. His real goal was to return to Evavug's lair to find the cursed artifact his host had hidden in that area. He had asked Evavug about it, and the latter mentioned that it did find a strange chest when it was digging underground. However, since it was about to give birth, it asked its subordinates to store it inside its treasury. The ideal scenario was that the chest remained intact after Evavug's disappearance. The worst-case scenario was that one of the bugs, or maybe other monsters, had broken the chest by force, which would have freed the cursed artifact inside of it. Once a cursed artifact latched itself to a creature, it would remain with that creature until it died. Since Evavug was already gone, 13 decided to go on an expedition with the Levinas family. Of course, the 69th Battalion and the Valkyries would also come with him because he wanted them to use this opportunity to train and polish their teamwork. Even if any of the people inside the conference room were suspicious of his sudden plan to return to Evavug's lair, none of them said anything to stop him. They had recognized that Zion would be the one calling the shots for this operation. So if he wanted to go to the southeast of the Rigel continent for a scouting mission, none of the people present would stop him. Some even wanted to accompany him, but the teenage boy put his foot down and firmly said no. not wanting to offend the person who strategized the downfall of the Manicore King and the Brain Beetle. Everyone stayed their hand and let him do whatever he wanted. They were still reeling from the announcement of the one, and because of this, they decided that it would be best to hold a separate meeting. This time, all the thrones and monarchs would be involved in it. 13 didn't care about their meeting. Even without attending, he already had an idea about what they would be discussing there. Also, since his grandfather, Arthur, would be participating in the meeting, he could just ask the old man about what they discussed at a later time. Right now, his priority was the cursed artifact. But just as 13 was about to leave the conference room, Wendell called out to him and gave him some good news. "We have acquired 4 of the 20 monsters you have asked us to find," Wendell said, making 13 look at him in surprise. It had only been a few days since he had given his list to everyone, and 4 of the monsters were already caught. "Douglas Griffin had sent 2 of those monsters to my caretaker in Solterra," Wendell explained. "They lived around his territory, you see, so it was much easier for him to acquire them than me." The monarch then glanced at his brother with a smile. "Renz, why don't you accompany Zion to the bestiary?" "Understood." Renz then made a gesture for the teenage boy to follow him. 13 didn't need to be told twice, so he followed the strategist of the Dvalin Federation without even bothering to take a second glance at the people who were looking at his small back with conflicted looks on their faces. If their future was to become as weak as the teenage boy, then no matter where they go, whether it be Solterra or Pangea, they would be at the bottom of the hierarchy. Once they lost their powers, they would no longer have the power to contend with their neighbors, which would also put an end to their lofty ambitions. When 13 and Renz arrived at the bestiary, the caretaker immediately led them to the place where the monsters labeled as extremely important were kept. Of course, the caretaker found this amusing. In his point of view, there was nothing special about the monsters being kept at the vault of the bestiary, where the most important monsters were kept for breeding or safekeeping. "These are the monsters that were entrusted to me, Lord Renz." The caretaker first bowed respectfully at the second-in-command of the Elrod clan, then to the teenage boy beside him. "You may leave," Renz ordered. "Close the door behind us, and make sure not to let anyone in. If you break my order, you will be replaced immediately. Do I make myself clear?" "Why, yes, sir." The caretaker immediately stood in attention before leaving in a rush, as if his pants were on fire. 13 gave Renz a sidelong glance before walking toward the 3 monsters who were inside a transparent prison cell that prevented them from escaping. The first monster he saw was none other than the mirror slime. The mirror slime in the cage was a rank 2 monster. 13 especially asked for a rank 2 monster because rank 1 mirror slimes didn't have the mirror ability, which they would only gain after they had increased their rank by 1. Since his version of the immortal parade of 100 demons didn't have any requirement about the monster's rank, he simply chose the monster whose abilities would be useful to him. Just as the name indicated, the mirror slime had the ability to make a copy of itself. This copy would be weaker than the main body by 50%, but it was still an annoying ability, especially when the mirror slime reached higher levels. The copy, which was sometimes called a mirror copy, would do exactly what the original body does. So if the mirror slime were to unleash an acid spray, the mirror copy would do the same simultaneously. If the main body were to tackle its target, the mirror copy would do the same, and both would hit their targets at the same time. Perhaps because of this ability, the maximum rank a mirror slime could reach was a rank 5 alpha monster. They were rare monsters, but as long as they lived in an environment where slimes were born, a mirror slime would appear in 1 out of 1,000 slime eggs. 13 could only place 100 monsters inside his black flag, so having the mirror slime's mirror ability would instantly double that number without too much effort. "You said that these monsters are going to be used for an experiment, right?" Renz inquired. "I'm curious. What kind of experiment are you planning to do, Zion?" "An experiment that will allow me to overcome my current limitations," 13 replied with a smile. "Although I will be a rookie for life, that doesn't mean that I couldn't find other ways to become stronger." "Oh, so you mean these monsters will help you break your limitations?" Renz asked with genuine curiosity. "No, they won't," 13 answered. "But it will certainly make things more interesting for me. So, in short, you're using our resources for your own personal gain? Something like that. Aren't you afraid that I'll tell the others about this? Renz inquired. Of course not, 13 replied. Even if you tell them, what can they do? Stop me. 13 smirked before giving the strategist a sidelong glance. You're a smart person, Renz Elrod, 13 stated before looking at the next monster beside the mirror slime. So, I believe you already know that I don't really need the Dvalin Federation. It's you guys who need me. Ren smiled faintly, but didn't say anything to refute Zion's words. After all, given the achievements of a teenage boy, it would be foolish to say that they didn't need him. So you're showing your true colors to me. But are you sure you want to do that? Ren smirked. The two of us only met each other for a short time, and we had a rather bad start. If I were in your shoes, I would never do such a thing, especially since I cannot trust you completely. That's fine, Renz Elrod. 13 nodded as he rubbed his chin while looking at the rank 3 monster karma chameleon in front of him. I trust you more than your brother. I trust you more than the monarchs. And I trust you more than the thrones. Tell me, aside from me, is there any other strategist who has gained your recognition? This question is so random, Renz arched an eyebrow. Why are you asking me this question? Just humor me, 13 replied. Who is the strategist that you think would definitely play a role in the invasion of the Signy continent? Renz pursed his lips and pondered if he should answer Zion's question. But seeing that the teenage boy was now looking at the third monster, which was known as the purple plume cockatrice, he thought that answering his question wouldn't be that of a big deal. The sage of the hero party, Renz answered. Although I don't want to admit it, that person is a very promising individual as well. I see. So that's the person who is fated to defeat Renz, 13 thought before nodding his head. I see. I thought you weren't going to answer, but since you did, it means that you and I can share some secrets between us. Renz frowned. Share some secrets between us? You don't strike me as a foolish, gullible person. Are you perhaps trying to purposely mess with me? Renz, you're too smart for your own good, 13 commented. Because of that, you tend to overthink. Didn't your brother send you here to watch over me and find out why I specifically asked for these monsters? Since I already know the reason, I decided to just tell you. After all, even if you knew, things wouldn't change. You can tell your brother what I told you earlier if you want. Anyway, even if he's suspicious about my true motive, he would still collect these monsters from me as a way to get on my good side. 13 then walked to the fourth cage where the final monster was located. Right now, the Dvalin Federation needs me, and until the northern regions are liberated, your brother will do what I tell him to do. Isn't that the same for you? The teenage boy then shifted his gaze to the man who held just as much importance to the Dvalin Federation as their monarch. Hey, Renz, 13 gave the strategist a devilish grin. Isn't it fun to treat monarchs and thrones as pawns? Isn't that the reason why you became a strategist? You might not be as strong as your brother, but your ability as a strategist has given you the status and influence that let you stand on the same peak as them. 13's voice was like that of a devil, telling Renz the things he had been keeping hidden at the deepest part of his heart. You've worked hard for many years to gain recognition, yet in just the span of a day, my importance superseded all of your accomplishments. With a word from my lips, the monarchs will move. With a wave of my hand, the thrones will obey. And with a whisper, entire armies would mobilize. This is power, Renz. This is the thing you've been seeking your entire life. So, why don't we strike a deal? 13 walked toward the man who was taller than him and looked up at him. However, even though it was the teenager raising his head to look at him, Renz subconsciously felt that he was being looked down on. Renz Elrod, would you like to have the power that I possess right now? 13 asked as he raised his hand for a handshake. If you take my hand, I promise that I will let you borrow my influence and help you realize your deepest, darkest desires. What the world needs right now are competent people. Those who do have power but are incompetent only serve as chess pieces in a game of chess. What I want is for you to become mine, Renz. Your loyalty, your devotion, your everything. Give it to me, and I shall free you, a frog from the well, and let you play on a bigger playing field that will allow you to experience what it's like to stand at the top of the world. Renz subconsciously gulped as he stared at 13's bright green eyes that seemed to contain all the knowledge of the world. However, instead of shaking the boy's hand, the strategist of the Dvalin Federation walked away with shaky steps. "I will not fall into your schemes, Zion Leventis," Ren said as he walked towards the exit of the bestiary. "Do you think I don't know that you will just treat me as one of your chess pieces? Not a chance, kid. Talk back to me when you're no longer wet behind your ears." 13 watched as the strategist of the Dvalin Federation finally disappeared. "You will not fall into my schemes," 13 said with amusement. "But you will, Renz. In fact, you are already part of it." Renz didn't know that the teenage boy was someone who specialized in laying out schemes within a scheme. The type of scheme that would fool one into thinking that they could still get away from it because they had discovered it early. Unfortunately for them, they were already moving according to the other scheme that the boy had orchestrated, making them fall deeper into the quagmire that the system of cannon fodders had prepared the moment he stepped foot in the Dvalin Federation. 13 hummed happily as the monsters he had asked for were being loaded into the aircraft carrier of the Leventis family. He wasn't so stupid as to do anything inside the bestiary of the Elrod clan. Without a doubt, there were certainly hidden cameras around, monitoring his movements. Only after they were far out into the sea would he begin his experiment. "Are you excited, Tiona?" 13 asked as he lightly tickled the black snake's chin. "You will soon have subordinates working under you." Tiona nodded her head, because she was also looking forward to acquiring new abilities through the divine artifact, which would allow her to become more powerful. "Young master, the loading of the cargo has been completed," Hans reported. "We can set sail anytime." "Good." 13 nodded before shifting his gaze toward Christopher, Colbert, and Viola, who were standing beside him. "Inform everyone that we will be leaving in 2 hours. Make sure that they are back on the ship by then." "Yes, sir." 2 hours later, the Leventis fleet, as well as the battleships of the Valkyries, left the headquarters of the Dvalin Federation. Their destination was none other than the southeastern regions of the Rigel continent. Since 13 had asked to speed up the travel time, they would reach their destination after a day had passed. So for the time being, he went to the restricted section of the aircraft carrier to conduct his experiment. 13 didn't take any chances and summoned Giga Chad and Blackett to act as his bodyguards. Although the monsters that were captured were currently drugged, and thus unable to muster any strength, he still didn't let his guard down and proceeded with caution. "Let's begin." 13 raised his hand, and a black pole materialized in his hand. The pole extended for 3 meters, and then a black flag appeared, fluttering even without a breeze. The symbol 13 glowed faintly as if answering its master's call. "Absorb it," 13 ordered, and the symbol bathed the mirror slime with a golden radiance. The mirror slime resisted, its body shaking from left to right. However, it was too weak to do anything. A few seconds later, it turned into particles of light and flew toward the center of the flag, making 13 smile faintly. Suddenly, rows of text appeared in front of him, asking him for confirmation. The monster, Mirror Slime, has been successfully added to the Immortal Parade of 100 Demons version 2. Name which ability of the Mirror Slime should be copied into the divine artifact. "Mirror," 13 replied. "Congratulations. Mirror has been added to the divine artifact's abilities. You're next." 13 pointed at the Karma Chameleon, which had the camouflage ability. Among the monsters who had the camouflage ability, the Karma Chameleon was the stealthiest of them all. Karma Chameleons could grow up to 2 meters long, and the maximum rank they could reach was a rank 3 monster. It was a menace in the jungles of Solterra. If not for the fact that it couldn't go past its rank limitation, it would have been one of the strongest monsters in the world, even with its camouflage alone that could completely erase its presence, scent, as well as life force. Its perfect camouflage could only be activated for a maximum of 2 hours every day, but it made it practically invisible to the naked eye even if it was moving. Whenever the Karma Chameleon wasn't using this ability, it would revert to its simple camouflage. This allowed it to blend with its surroundings, though no longer completely invisible. The monster, Karma Chameleon, has been successfully added to the Immortal Parade of 100 Demons version 2. Name which ability of the Karma Chameleon should be copied into the divine artifact. Perfect Camouflage, 13 replied. Congratulations. Perfect Camouflage has been added to the divine artifact's abilities. Without saying another word, 13 pointed at the third monster, and the black flag bathed it in a golden light. But this petrification breath was special. The purple-plumed cockatrice, whose beak was sealed shut by a metallic clamp, was also unable to resist the power of the divine artifact and was soon sucked into its body. The purple-plumed cockatrice could unleash a petrification breath that had a very high chance of turning whatever it hit into stone. But this petrification breath was special. Although its target would turn into stone, that wasn't actually the truth about this ability. The purple-plumed cockatrice's breath attack was meant to capture things alive. It would create a near-unbreakable stone statue of its target, which would remain active for up to 2 hours. This breath attack only worked for monsters that were at most a rank higher than the purple-plumed cockatrice. Now that it was reverted down to a rank 1 monster, its breath attack would only be effective against rank 1 and rank 2 monsters. Many might think that it was an underwhelming ability, but 13 didn't do things without a reason. Since he added the cocktrace within his immortal parade of 100 demons, its ability would certainly have its uses. The purple-plumed cockatrice has been successfully added to the immortal parade of 100 demons version 2. This monster was something he truly wanted. When Tiona gained the ability to acquire skills through eating monster cores and monster parts, one of the cores he had fed her belonged to this monster. Name which ability of the purple-plumed cockatrice should be copied into the divine artifact. Petrification Breath, 13 replied. Congratulations. Petrification Breath has been added to the divine artifact's abilities. 13 smiled faintly before looking at the final monster in his collection. This monster was something he truly wanted. When Tiona gained the ability to acquire skills through eating monster cores and monster parts, one of the cores he had fed her belonged to this monster. And this monster was none other than a Daleketnin. It was similar to a dryad, but only favored living on corrupted trees that were changed by miasma. They had strong psychic abilities that complemented the purple-plumed cocktrace petrification breath. The Daleketnin has been successfully added to the immortal parade of 100 demons version 2. Name which ability of the Daleketnin should be copied into the divine artifact. Telekinesis, 13 replied. Congratulations. Telekinesis has been added to the divine artifact's abilities. After absorbing the last monster, 13 didn't hesitate to summon them all at the same time. The mirror slime, the Karma Chameleon, the purple-plumed cocktrace, and the Daleketnin all appeared in front of the boy and bowed their heads in respect to him. All of these monsters' ranks had regressed to that of a rank 1 monster, which should have made them weaker than their previous state. But after gaining new abilities, they would be able to perform well, especially under 13's command. Also, any creature that had been absorbed by the Black Flag would become loyal to him and follow his orders without fail. Tiona looked at her new subordinates and nodded her head in satisfaction. The moment they were absorbed by the Black Flag, she sensed that she gained new skills through them. Now, let's all practice together so that you can work with Tiona in a battle, 13 stated. All the creatures obeyed and did as 13 told them. The teenage boy watched as they tried to use the abilities they acquired from their comrades, and he was amazed at how useful they were. Although he only had 5 monsters under his banner right now, he believed that in time, he would have more, which would further boost his strength as he faced the challenges that were laid out in front of him by fate. The sound of explosions reverberated in the surroundings as the 69th Battalion and the Valkyries raided Ivavog's territory while riding their flying mounts. Although they had lost their king, the insects were still very much active. Their new leader was a rank 7 sovereign orange-spotted blister beetle that could unleash a spray that would instantly melt a wanderer if it hit them. Its attack range reached up to a mile, making it a very dangerous opponent for long-distance battles. Although it could fly, flying wasn't its strongest skill. Because of this, it was almost always on the ground when it unleashed its blister spray on its enemies. 13 had already briefed the 69th Battalion and the Valkyries on how to deal with the orange-spotted blister beetle. No matter how strong the beetle was, it couldn't deal them any damage because its blister spray was unable to reach its enemies flying high up in the sky. The 69th Battalion and the Valkyries sniped it from above with their Imperium-powered rifles, forcing the blister beetle to take defensive actions. "Don't get too confident," Marion ordered. "Just because your enemies cannot hit you and cannot catch up to you doesn't mean you should lower your guard." Since she was 13th's vice commander, everyone listened to her orders and remained vigilant as they peppered the beetle army from the sky. 13 watched the battle from the ground with a satisfied look on his face. Having observed enough, he, Arthur, and Hans jumped into Rocky's mouth. They would once again descend into Evavug's lair while all the beetles were above ground, fighting against the intruders who had trespassed their domain. Since Rocky already knew where to go, it didn't take long before they reached their destination. "Remember, don't touch anything," 13 said. "Once the cursed artifact latches on someone, it would try to subjugate that person and make them its slave. I know how to neutralize it, so I won't be in any danger. Just stick to the plan, and all of us will be safe." Arthur and Hans nodded. When the teenage boy told them that he would return to Evavug's lair to get a cursed weapon, both of them tried to persuade him not to go. However, after 13 assured them that everything would be fine, they reluctantly agreed on the condition that they would accompany him and serve as his bodyguards. Arthur would not admit it personally, but Zion had an incredibly high strategic value to the Levinas family. There was no way he would let the teenage boy enter a dangerous situation without him. When Rocky ejected the 3 humans from his mobile fortress, he stayed close so that he could save his master just in case something unexpected happened. 13 scanned Evavug's treasury, which was filled with gold coins and precious gems. For a moment, the teenage boy wondered if Evavug was actually not a beetle, but a dragon in disguise. After carefully looking around, he found a black metallic chest made from adamantium at the corner of the cavern. 13 didn't hesitate to run in its direction and check if its contents were intact. After seeing that its seal was still active, the teenage boy finally breathed a sigh of relief before storing the chest inside his dimensional storage for safekeeping. "Rocky, loot all the treasures here before we go," 13 ordered. The magma Balboa nodded and swallowed the piles of gold and precious gems, leaving nothing behind. When that was done, 13, Arthur, and Hans once again entered Rocky's mobile fortress and left the scene. They didn't want to stay longer than needed because there was a possibility that the Centipede King might pop up again and, this time, would no longer let them escape unscathed. After reaching the surface, Arthur immediately summoned his winged serpent to carry them back to the ship. "That's enough training for now," 13 said through his communicator. "Everyone retreat." The 69th Battalion and the Valkyries immediately circled back to the warships in the sea and called it a day. After getting the hang of flying in the sky, the 69th Battalion was feeling more confident in the upcoming expedition to liberate the Rigel continent. When everyone had safely boarded the ship, 13 once again went to the restricted section of the aircraft carrier. He had been hoping that the chest was unscathed. Otherwise, they would have a major calamity on their hands if the cursed artifact managed to latch itself onto a monster. But since the seal was still active, it meant that the adamantine chest hadn't been tampered with, and the cursed artifact was still inside. In order to ensure that no one would become the victim of the artifact, he left Tiona inside his room and asked her to behave and wait for his return. Tiona knew that her master only wanted to keep her safe, so she obeyed his command and didn't insist on coming with him. The chest could be opened by someone who knew how to safely remove the seal on its body. Of course, it could also be broken by brute strength. This was the reason why he was worried that the insects might have gone crazy due to the loss of their leader and vented by destroying everything around them. Fortunately, that wasn't the case. 13 carefully placed a few cores around the adamantine chest, intending to use rune magic to unlock the chest safely. As the cores lit one by one, 13 wrote several runes in the air, which fell upon the seal, creating cracks over its surface. After a few minutes, the seal shattered and the chest swung wide open. "Your soul is mine." A black crystal orb jumped out of the chest and slammed directly on 13's chest, making the teenage boy stagger. "I have waited hundreds of years for this moment. Curse the human for trapping me. I will not forgive him. I will destroy everything he holds sacred." The cursed artifact laughed like a madman as it covered the teenage boy's body in a black metallic armor, intending to make him its vessel. The name of the cursed artifact was Soul Eater. As its name suggested, it devoured the soul of its victim. Once it latched onto a living creature, it would immediately trap its body in a black metallic armor to prevent it from escaping. After that, it would immediately start to consume the soul and absorb its memories, mannerisms, as well as any vital information it possessed. This way, it could pretend to be that creature and integrate with its society undetected. It would then start a killing spree when the time is right, increasing its power by absorbing the souls of the slain. When 13's entire body was covered in a black metallic armor, the Soul Eater then entered the teenage boy's sea of consciousness and consumed him from within. But something unexpected happened. The Soul Eater found itself in a pitch-black space, with nothing to see except for a pair of glowing green eyes that were looking down on it from the heavens. As a sentient artifact, it was capable of feeling human-like emotions, so the moment it saw those pair of glowing green eyes, it felt that something was terribly wrong. "I am possible," the Soul Eater shouted. "Why don't you have a soul? What are you?" Just as the Soul Eater was panicking because this was its first time experiencing something like this, the owner of the glowing green eyes chuckled. "Me?" 13 asked as something gigantic moved from the darkness, grabbing the Soul Eater firmly in its hands. "I'm your friendly neighborhood system of cannon fodders. Sorry to disappoint you, but I have no soul. Now that the introduction is over, it's time for you to serve your new master." From the real world, 13 slowly opened his eyes and summoned the creation sphere in his hand. A moment later, he pressed the creation sphere over the chest of the black metallic armor. "And no, what are you doing?" The Soul Eater suddenly had a bad feeling after he felt the power of the creation sphere spread over its entire body. "Stop! How many souls have you eaten?" 13 asked in a chilling tone. "How many lives have you ruined? It's time for you to pay for your sins, Soul Eater. I will be your judge, jury, and executioner. Be reborn and serve me as your new master. Don't worry, I'll make sure to put you to good use." The Soul Eater screamed because, for the first time in its long existence, it felt as if every fiber of its being was breaking apart. And while it was writhing in agony, with its soul reaching the breaking point, a laughter that seemed to laugh at the entire world and even the gods themselves reached Soul Eater's ears. That laughter, which sounded arrogant and sad at the same time, echoed in its senses just before its existence faded away. The Soul Eater knew that it would cease to exist to give way to a new life that would be molded by its new master, who would help him protect all that he held sacred in his hands. Arthur paced back and forth in front of the restricted section as he waited for his no-good grandson to come out. 5 days had passed since the teenage boy had locked himself up, and until now, no one had seen even a shadow. Hans, who had been asked by 13 to keep watch on the door and prevent anyone from entering, was just as worried as Arthur. However, since he was told to wait until the teenager came out of his own accord and not enter the room no matter what happened, he simply remained outside. Both men wanted to forcefully open the door because they were worried about Zion, but they also didn't dare do it because it might cause whatever the teenage boy was doing inside the room to fail. Finally, just as Arthur was reaching the limit of his patience, the door finally opened, and white smoke filled the entryway very quickly. The patriarch of the Leventis family waved his hand, and a gust of air dispersed the white smoke, allowing him to see what was inside the room. "Brad, are you still alive?" Arthur appeared right beside the teenage boy, who was sitting cross-legged at the center of the room. "Barely alive, 13 replied. I'm hungry, Gramps. Bring me some food. Arthur snorted before giving Hans a sidelong glance. The butler nodded his head in understanding and went to the kitchen to bring the teenage boy something easy to eat and digest. When he was certain that Hans was already out of earshot, he asked his grandson the question that had been nagging inside his head since they returned from Evavug's lair. What kind of cursed artifact is inside the chest? Arthur asked. Are you still my grandson? A hoarse chuckle escaped 13's lips because he found Arthur's question very funny. However, this question was also valid in this circumstance, given that several curse gears had the ability to completely take over a person's consciousness and take full control of their body. Gramps, out of curiosity, what would you have done if I was taken over by the cursed item? 13 asked. Punch you to oblivion until you're only a step away from death, Arthur replied. Then I will have someone heal you and repeat the process over and over again until the cursed item is forced to let you take control of your body again. Such methods have been deemed effective in the past, allowing those who were taken over by cursed artifacts to regain their consciousness. That sounds painful, 13 asked. But how will you know that I am under the influence of a cursed item? Simple. I will just ask you a question, Arthur answered. What kind of question? 13 asked with great curiosity. Who do you love the most? Huh? What kind of stupid question is that? 13 didn't know why Arthur had asked such a thing. In fact, after being asked this question, he found out that he was unable to give a concrete answer. Love was an alien concept to him. The feelings he had for his family were more of protectiveness than love. Since he had lost many hosts in the past, he didn't want the same thing to happen to his family, so he wanted them to be safe at all times. Arthur carefully observed his grandson and saw the confusion in his body language. For a brief moment, he thought that his grandson had been taken over by the cursed artifact, but his gut instinct was telling him that Zion was still Zion. What's wrong? Arthur frowned. Can't you answer a simple question? Gramps, ask me anything except for love, 13 answered. I'm still too young to understand such a thing. You don't love your family? Arthur inquired. I care for them very much, 13 answered. But I don't know if that's love. If someone were to harm my parents or my siblings, I would definitely come to their rescue and make whoever was trying to harm them pay with my own hands. I just don't know if that is called love. I don't understand it, and I have no plans of understanding it. Love makes people weak. 13 had seen this happen many times. His host had loved, and some of their lovers had betrayed them, causing them immense grief and pain. This was why he associated the feelings of love with weakness. He had seen it for himself. Those who were in love often made very questionable decisions. Forget it. Arthur sighed. You're very smart, but you're dumb when it comes to this thing. Then why did you ask me that question, Gramps? 13 asked with a frown. That's because cursed artifacts also don't know what's the meaning of love, Arthur answered. They are true to their desires, may it be greed, destruction, jealousy, or envy, but they're incapable of understanding what love is. 854. 13 blinked once and twice before rubbing his chin. Since he was a system, he could also be technically considered an artifact that didn't understand what love meant. After careful consideration, he came to the conclusion that his grandfather was right. Artifacts and systems like him didn't fully understand what love was. Anyway, are you done with whatever you are doing? Arthur asked. The Dvalin Federation had been pestering us non-stop, repeatedly asking why we still hadn't returned to their headquarters. Your battalion and the Valkyries are also on standby and wondering where you have gone. Make sure to see them after you eat. 13 nodded. Yes, I'm done. The cursed artifact is under my full control now. Can I see it? Arthur inquired. 13 nodded and stood shakily with his grandfather's help. A moment later, he clenched his fists, and his entire body was covered from head to foot with a black armor. Located on the chest area was a shining green gem, which was of the same color as the glow on the eye sockets of the armor. Faint, glowing lines appeared on the armor's body, making it look like a cyborg powered by Imperium. The helmet had a demonic design with 2 curved horns on its head. Suddenly, a black cape fluttered from the armor's back, reaching down up to the back of 13's knees. Arthur eyed his grandson from head to foot, but he couldn't sense any aura coming from his body. It was as if he was looking at a being filled with mystery, for he couldn't sense how strong it was. Interesting, Arthur commented. It completely hides your level of power. 13 nodded before deactivating his armor. Gramps, I don't intend to let anyone know about this armor for the time being, 13 stated. So, keep it a secret. I understand, Arthur replied. But does that armor make you powerful? Will it help you surpass the rank of a rookie? The short answer is yes, 13 replied. With this armor, I don't have to worry about my safety, even if I'm fighting a rank 4 sovereign in a one-on-one battle. I see. That gives you the power on par with masters and grandmasters, Arthur commented. Something like that, 13 nodded. Truth be told, 13 was still busy tweaking his living armor and adding some upgrades to it. Although the creation sphere had already merged with Soulkeeper, 13 had added a feature where he could modify the armor anytime and anywhere. This allowed him to create variations that would be useful in any kind of terrain or situation. The only reason why he stopped with his upgrades was because he was dead hungry. Even if he had strong willpower, he was still a living, breathing human who needed to eat in order to function properly. When Hans returned with the food, he wasn't alone. Christopher, Colbert, Shauna, Viola, and Marion were with him. After seeing their commander, all 5 of them sighed in relief, because they finally saw the young man whom they had recognized as the leader of their expedition. Tiona kept on nudging 13's cheek as her way of letting her master know that she was upset. After the teenage boy was done eating breakfast, he immediately went back to his room to check on Tiona's condition. Having known that it might take him a while to finish his experiment, he had prepared plenty of food and water so that she wouldn't go hungry or thirsty while he was away. Don't be mad, Tiona, 13 tried to pacify the black snake, who was clearly upset because it had been 5 days since they last saw each other. Tiona hissed and pouted. The teenage boy only shook his head helplessly, seeing his beast companion on strike. Since he knew that it would take a while for Tiona to calm down, he went on his rounds and visited his battalion and the Valkyries, who were training together. While 13 was away, Marion took the 69th Battalion to Evavug's domain and practiced their maneuvers for the upcoming expedition to liberate the northern regions of the continent. Although 13 and the 69th Battalion had only spent a few months in the Rigel continent, they had already gotten the hang of fighting against hordes of monsters safely. The only times they felt truly helpless was when they faced the Birdman and his horde of flying monsters. That was a very scary and tough battle for them, for it had been their first time facing such overwhelming numbers of enemies. Not to mention that they were also unprepared for it. When they raided Evavug's territory, although the flying beetles that rose up to face them numbered in the tens of thousands, the 69th Battalion's fear was drastically lower during that battle. The reason? They realized that no matter what the flying insects did, they would not be able to catch up to the rank 3 gerfalcons that 13 had acquired for them. This allowed them to safely and effectively attack their enemies from a distance, killing them before they could even come close to them. With repeated practice, their confidence grew, but 13 made it a point to make them understand that overconfidence was a slow and insidious poison. Although he had been reluctant to do it, he reminded them of what happened to the Valkyries who thought that they had everything under control. That incident had been firmly etched in their memories, so it helped them stay grounded, preventing them from thinking that they could easily escape whenever they wanted to escape. The gerfalcons are fast, but there are flying monsters that are faster than them, 13 stated after everyone had gathered after their flight training. One example is Christopher's Rock, who could easily outfly any monster below rank 6 sovereign. If you have forgotten, there are still rocks in the Rigel continent, and we will be facing those rocks when we start our conquest of the north. The faces of the 69th Battalion turned pale after hearing their commander's words. They had been so used to outmaneuvering and outflying their enemies that they had forgotten about their mounts being merely rank 3 monsters. Seeing their reactions, 13 couldn't help but smile. This was the exact result he was aiming for. This is the reason why I asked the Valkyries to help all of you train, 13 stated. You don't have to fight a rock alone. Your squad will help you deal with them. As long as you hone your teamwork, you won't have to worry about becoming rock food. 13 paused a bit before glancing at his grandfather, who seemed to want to talk to him. That's all. Everyone dismissed. 13 ordered before going to where his grandfather was standing. Arthur gestured for him to follow, and the teenage boy did exactly that. When they arrived at Arthur's office on the ship, the teenage boy saw Michael, Hans, Renz, and Benedict, who had arrived a day ago to deliver a message to Zion. Sit, Arthur ordered before he went to sit at the head of the table. Everyone did as they were told and waited for Arthur to start talking. After the announcement by the One, there had been significant movement from the Sirius continent. Arthur said, the Ashford and the Stallard clans had declared that they will give their full cooperation to the Cygni continent and do everything in their power to prevent it from being conquered by the Jinns and Magians. It seems that the wake-up call is effective, 13 smirked. I just wish they would put more effort when the rank 9 monsters arrive. That will be the time when the willpower of the monarchs will be truly tested. Arthur nodded. They have also reached out toward the Dvalin Federation and had pledged to send some of their strongest warriors to help liberate the North. They also agreed to put their forces under your command. However, they also warned that if their forces were to be sent to die a dog's death, they would make you pay for it. 13 sneered after hearing the warning of the 2 monarchs, who ruled the Sirius continent together. Tell them that if they don't want to die, then they should just stay at home and take care of their kids, 13 commented. I have no need for cowards. Renz, who was paying close attention to the teenage boy, smiled faintly, sharing the same sentiments with the latter. Usually the Ashford and the Stallard clans don't care about what happens beyond the borders of the Sirius continent, so I think we should be careful not to offend them, Benedict tried to mediate. We will need all the help we can get if we wish to liberate the Rigel continent. We don't need them, 13 stated. They're just extra baggage. I stand by what I said. As the supreme commander of the Alliance, I don't want pig teammates in my team. A chuckle spread inside the room, making everyone look at Renz, who had been unable to hold back his laughter. Well said, Renz commented as he gazed at the boy who had made him an offer back in the Dvalin Federation's main headquarters. I also don't like pig teammates, so I will personally send your message back to them right now. The right-hand man of the Dvalin Federation tapped his communicator and connected it with the patriarchs of the Ashford clan and the Stallard clan. The 2 monarchs from these 2 clans had passed the role of patriarch to their sons, giving the latter free reign over their respective business in Pangea. Their fathers were more focused on expanding their domains in Solterra, in preparation for the time when Pangea would be overrun by the Jinns and Magians. However, the declaration of the One made the monarchs change their plans. This was why they ordered their family to cooperate with the other monarchs and members of the 10 prestigious families. Half a minute later, 2 projections appeared from Renz's communicator, showing 2 middle-aged men who were looking at 13 with narrow eyes. Arthur Leventis, it seems that your grandson doesn't appreciate the olive branch we have extended to the Dvalin Federation, Scott Ashford stated. Just a little foal who gained a bit of fame dares to talk back to his elders, Tyler Stallard commented. It seems that the Leventis family doesn't know how to properly educate their young. Arthur was about to retort, but someone else beat him to it. Hey, it seems that the 2 of you are having a big misunderstanding here, 13 said, making everyone in the room look in his direction. We don't need cowards. If you don't want to die, then don't bother coming here. You ungrateful brat. It seems that you really don't understand who you're dealing with, Scott Ashford said icily. Of course, I don't know who I am dealing with, 13 replied with a smirk. Since when did I know the name of nobodies? You know me, but I don't know you. We're not on the same level, okay? Ha ha ha. This brat indeed has guts, Tyler Stallard grinned. Very well. Since you don't want our help, then we won't send you any. Sure. Bye-bye. 13 waved his hand and then made a gesture for Renz to cut the connection, which left Benedict looking at 13 as if he was seeing him for the first time. Are you mad? Benedict asked. Those are the patriarchs of the 2 monarch clans. I'm not, 13 replied as he tinkered with his communicator. But after this expedition is over, they would have no choice but to reach out to me. 13 didn't want the Ashford and Stallard clan to join the alliance because it would just complicate things. These 2 clans were known for using strong-arm methods in order to get the bigger share of the pie when it came to resources. The teenage boy planned to monopolize all the resources in the Rigel continent in order to build his own personal army. He was fine with the Dvalin Federation and the central government getting some shares. But he didn't want the Ashford clan and Stallard clan to dabble in his business. It's still too early for them to get in my way, 13 thought. I still need to do a few things before I can contend with these two forces. 13 had already laid out his plans, but it would take time for them to grow. For the time being, he was careful in selecting his allies, which was why he had extended an olive branch to Ren's, because he believed that he would be the perfect accomplice in the things that 13 planned to do in the Rigel continent. Inside the Dvalin Tower, it has come to our attention that you've rejected the Ashford and Stallard families' offer to send their armies to the Rigel continent, Wendell said as he looked at the projection showing 13, who was in the middle of a scouting mission somewhere in the southeastern region of the Rigel continent. That's right, 13 replied. Can you tell us the real reason why you rejected them? Trevor Remington inquired. Their reinforcement will increase our chance of success, so I think that turning down their offer is a bad idea. The decision-makers of the Dvalin Federation and the Aldebaran continent, as well as the central government, were all invited to the meeting. Some of them were participating through projections, while others were physically present in the tower to conduct their emergency meeting. The Ashford and Stallard families are opportunistic hyenas, 13 answered. They'll put as minimal effort as possible, then ask for big returns for their services. In simpler terms, they will ask for a bigger slice of the pie, and it will likely be a portion of the Rigel continent. The Dvalin Federation has dedicated years, manpower, and resources to one day reclaim their lands. We already have the support of the Aldebaran continent, as well as the central government. We already have more than enough manpower for the mission. Do you really want to ask for more? Are you sure you want to share the pie with those two clans? If you're not careful, they might backstab you, you know? Wendell and Trevor frowned because the term backstab was a very sensitive issue for them. Of course, 13 knew about this, which was why he deliberately chose his words, to make the two monarchs understand their current situation. While Wendell and Trevor were still hesitating, the teenage boy decided to throw breadcrumbs that would make them understand the benefits of not having the Ashford and Stallard clan in their alliance. Since they won't be included in our counterattack, that means that they also won't have the rights to claim any resources from the Rigel continent, 13 stated. This is just a rough guess, but I believe there are still deposits of Imperium in the northern regions. If they get wind of it, I'm sure they'll insist on the mining rights of those mineral deposits to be turned over to them. After hearing 13's words, Wendell glanced at his brother, Ren's, waiting for his input. Imperium is a very important resource, and it's something we badly need, Ren said. However, it doesn't change the fact that this mission will be extremely dangerous. Are you certain that our current manpower is enough to conquer the North? As long as everyone follows my orders, you will have nothing to worry about, 13 answered. Out of the 8 kings sharing control of the Rigel continent, only 5 remain. Your dreams of reclaiming your lands are within reach, so you should no longer have any reason to hesitate. The teenage boy's words were like a wake-up call to the Dvalin Federation, making them clench their fists tightly. Zion Levinas was right. Only 5 kings remained, so this was not the time to hesitate. They should strike while the iron was still hot and trust that the legendary rookie would lead them to victory. How about the Earth Dragons? Wendell asked. You said that you will deal with them. Have you come up with a strategy against them? Yes, 13 nodded, but I still need time to complete my preparations. At most, I will need 5 to 7 days to complete my preparations. Don't worry. I will only give the order to attack when I am certain that the Earth Dragons will not leave their territory. I don't plan on sending the Alliance to their deaths. We still have to deal with Signy. I can't have the bulk of our forces getting annihilated in this expedition. Everyone breathed a sigh of relief after hearing Zion's statement. What they were worried about was having to fight a Pyrrhic battle. Even if they managed to emerge victorious, it wouldn't be worth it if the losses they received were too great for them to recover. Lastly, while you guys are waiting for me to finish my preparations, please check the second list I sent through your communicators. If you can procure them before the battle starts, then much better. The second list of monsters, 13, wanted to capture, also had 20 monsters. Although the first list was still not yet completed, thanks to the joint effort between the Aldebaran continent, the Dvalan Federation, and the central government, 12 of the 20 monsters had already been secured. These monsters were now on their way to the city that belonged to the Elrod clan in Solterra. Once they gained possession of these monsters, they would ship them to Zion immediately, allowing him to add them to his immortal parade of 100 demons. Are there any more questions? 13 addressed the leaders who were present in the meeting. Seeing that no one wanted to ask any questions, the teenage boy excused himself from the meeting. The rest of them remained and continued discussing the division of troops and the roles each group would play according to 13's instructions. The next day, 13's drone, which had been flying for nearly 3 days, finally arrived at the center of the Rigel continent, where a dimensional gate over 300 meters tall was located. Guarding it on 3 sides were 3 earth dragons, who were nearly 100 meters tall. To 13's surprise, he found other monsters with the earth dragons, whom he didn't expect to see. After talking with Evavug, he now knew the names and even the personalities of the 5 remaining kings of the Rigel continent. Centipede King, Jalrog. Brood Mother, Nizana. Wyvern King, Vanaroth. Wolf King, Aram. And last but not the least, Death Lord, Erasmus. 13's drone observed these monsters from a safe distance before unleashing his beetle scouts to take a closer look and listen to their conversation. Although he was surprised to see these monsters all gathered together to have a meeting of their own, he had already known that it was only a matter of time before they did such a thing. In fact, it would have been more surprising if these monsters didn't gather together to discuss the current state of the continent they had ruled uncontested for many years. The spider beetles were equipped with very sensitive microphones that could pick up sounds from hundreds of meters away. When 13's drones finally came within the range where he could hear the monsters talking, the teenage boy couldn't help but smile. His unique skill, universal language proficiency, was doing its job properly, allowing him to understand what the monsters were talking about. I don't like our current situation, but I find it quite troubling that you, Jalrog, tried to devour Evavug during its time of weakness, one of the earth dragons said. What do you have to say for yourself? It was the perfect opportunity to break through to the next stage, Jalrog replied. I would be a fool to miss a once-in-a-lifetime chance to become a rank 9 sovereign. The earth dragon glared at the Centipede King, but Jalrog was unfazed by its glare. It wasn't afraid of the earth dragons, knowing that they wouldn't kill it, given their critical situation. There were only 5 kings left to protect the outer regions of the Rigel continent. If they killed Jalrog here, only 4 would remain, making it more difficult to manage the vacant territories by themselves. They didn't want their forces to be stretched too thin, especially since the Earth Dragons must protect the central gate that would allow their master to cross over to Pangea. I have a feeling that the humans will target one of us soon, the brood mother, Nizana, said. It seems that their strategy is to fight us one by one, allowing them to gain the advantage in numbers. Back then, we didn't really have to care much. The humans were too weak to do anything, the Wolf King, Aram, commented. It seems that the humans have gotten stronger now. Their growth is faster than what the Master has calculated. True, the Wyvern King, Vanaroth, nodded. According to the Master, the humans will need 50 more years before they gain the power to defeat one of us. It seems that a variable has appeared, ruining Master's calculation. This is the result of everyone's arrogance, Death Lord Erasmus stated. Back then, we even hoped for one of us to get killed so that we could expand their lands. Now that it has come true, things have become more complicated. We can no longer underestimate our enemies like we did in the past. That's right. The second Earth Dragon nodded. As much as I don't want to admit it, Evavug has played the role of deterrence these past few years. Now that he's gone, the humans will be emboldened by his absence. So what do we do now? The Wolf King asked. We can no longer afford to remain aloof. If they target us one by one, we will be done for. How about we move closer to the center of the continent? The broodmother proposed. That way, we will be able to cover a shorter distance if we need to reinforce each other when the humans attack. What? Are you saying that we need to abandon our current territories and stick together like cowards? The Centipede King asked. It seems that the years have only made you weak, Nizana. The time has changed, Jalrog, the broodmother replied. Zed, Amos, and Evavug have already fallen. It will be foolish to think that the humans are still the weaklings you once bullied in the past. Right now, they still wouldn't dare approach the center of the continent because of us, one of the Earth Dragons said. At most, they will just settle for the outer regions like they did in the past. Don't forget our main mission in this world. We are to hold and protect this dimensional gate so that Master can cross over and conquer this world. The gate needs 5 more years to mature before it can allow a Magian Prince to pass through. As long as we can hold on until then, we will have already completed our mission. Cowards, the Centipede King screeched. Zed and Amos were defeated because the humans used underhanded tricks to win against them. If only Zed and Vanaroth joined forces and directly attacked the Valen Federation, we wouldn't have this problem right now. You're blaming us? The Wyvern King sneered. You could have destroyed the human base any time you wanted, but you were too busy waiting for Evavug to show any sign of weakness because you wanted to devour it. Admit it, you selfish insect. You've been hoping that the humans would weaken one of us so that you can go for the kill. The Centipede King chuckled, but didn't affirm or deny the Wyvern King's words. Can you two cut it out? The Death Lord stated. If only we had the corpses of those 3, then this wouldn't be a problem. Even if they're dead, I can just revive them. After all, that's the role given to me by Master and the reason why I was sent here in this world. Too bad. The humans are just as greedy as this selfish insect, the Wyvern King said. So what do we do now? Do we all retreat near the center and let the humans take over the outer regions? Anyway, we only need to hold on for 5 more years, and there will be nothing they can do to stop Master from taking over the world. Indeed, one of the Earth Dragons commented, so what if the humans can reclaim the outer areas? Once Master arrives, their entire world will fall under our rule. So should we talk to Zed's, Amos, and Evavug's replacements? The broodmother asked. Their second-in-commands have now taken over their territories. I've talked to them on my way here, and they said they don't plan on leaving the territories that belong to their former masters, the Wolf King replied. The blister beetle at the southeast is very stubborn. Although the humans have raided their domain countless times, it still doesn't have plans to leave. It's probably thinking that no matter how many of its kind are killed, they can easily be replaced because we birth eggs numbering in the hundreds, the broodmother said. You insects sure know how to multiply. One of the Earth Dragons laughed. So how about this? We'll let them do what they want. If they don't want to retreat to the center, then that's their problem. That's right. Another Earth Dragon nodded. We just need to wait for 5 more years anyway. It will be over before we know it. The thing we need to do now is to protect this gate with our lives. As long as there's no wild variable, our victory is assured, even if the humans become even stronger in that span of time. All the kings, with the exception of the Centipede King, agreed with the Earth Dragon's plan of pulling back their forces near the center of the continent. 13, who had been listening to their conversation from start to finish, smiled faintly. 5 years, 13 muttered. After 5 years, a Magian Prince will appear in the Rigel continent. This news was incredibly bad news for the people of Pangea. Right now, they were already having trouble with rank 8 and rank 9 sovereigns. If a Magian Prince or a Princess appears, all of them could kiss Pangea goodbye. However, instead of being fearful, 13 couldn't help but chuckle. This news was truly unexpected. He already knew that the dimensional gates only needed to mature before stronger beings could pass through them. This was also the reason why he had created Nautilus and Athena. 5 years was more than enough time for him to disrupt the plans of the Jinns. So he decided to do something that would force the 3 Earth Dragons to take their guarding duty more seriously and leave the remaining kings to their fate. If only I managed to devour Evavug and its egg back then, things would be different. The Centipede King, Jalrog, grumbled to himself as he dug deep underground. The others will now be more wary of me, and I won't be able to push my plan into motion. The humans are also getting more and more active as of late. It's only a matter of time before they gain a stronghold in these lands. The Centipede King still remembered the time when he was still moving unhindered in their homeworld, Gamara. If not for the fact that he had accidentally stumbled upon a Magian prince, he would have already broken through to the next rank a decade ago. The Magian prince had given it two choices back then: submit or die. Jalrog had lofty ambitions, so it naturally didn't want to die. Left with no choice, it could only bow its head and agree to be drafted as one of the rank 8 sovereigns who would serve as the vanguard to conquer the world of Pangea. The process of their conquest had been relatively smooth since the humans were too weak, unable to even effectively resist their invasion. Back then, Jalrog was happy, believing that if it devoured wanderers, it would be able to become a rank 9 monster. It had planned to use the remaining time before its master crossed over to Pangea to become a Magian prince. After that, it could finally exact its revenge and kill the prince who had forced it to submit decades ago. Unfortunately, the wanderers it killed were too weak. They couldn't even let it break through to a rank 9 monster. It wanted to devour its comrades, but with the rank 9 Earth Dragons stationed to monitor their movements, the Centipede King was forced to halt its plans. The other kings were strong in their own rights, so it couldn't easily backstab them and devour their bodies and cores. There had only been one target that it could kill without fail, and that was none other than Evavug. Jalrog was highly resistant to mind control, so the Brain Beetle's ability wasn't a threat to it. However, there was a problem. Even if it ate Evavug, so what? Being a rank 9 sovereign wouldn't guarantee its safety. After all, there were still the 7 kings and the 3 Earth Dragons, who would hunt it down because of its betrayal. So Jalrog forced itself to endure. However, it all changed when it sensed something unexpected. It felt a powerful fluctuation spread underground, coming from Evavug's territory. That was when it realized that the Brain Beetle was about to give birth to an egg. It was also the moment that Jalrog realized that the moment it had been waiting for had finally arrived. The Centipede King knew that if it ate Evavug, it would cross the threshold of a rank 9 sovereign. And if it also managed to eat the Brain Beetle's egg, which was emitting a strong surge of power, Jalrog believed that it would make him break through into a pseudo-Jinn prince. If it succeeded, it would then hunt the kings one by one until it broke through to a Magian prince. By then, even if the 3 Earth Dragons worked together, all of them would just become food for Jalrog. Once the leaders of the monsters were dead, it would then devour the remaining monsters in the continent until it finally became a Magian prince. With its newfound power, it would cross over to the next continent and feast on the wanderers on that side, allowing it to advance into a king. 5 years later, it would return to the Rigel continent and have its revenge on the Magian prince who had forced it to become its subordinate and eat him too. Its plan was solid and would have succeeded without any problems. However, it didn't expect that a variable would arise and humans would attack Evavug right after it had given birth. Even so, Jalrog believed that it could still salvage the situation. The addition of the humans didn't matter, for its strength alone could overwhelm them. Evavug was in a weakened state, and its larva bodyguards were no match for the Centipede King. However, something unexpected happened. Evavug suddenly disappeared without warning. After it disappeared, the humans took the Brain Beetle's egg and made a full retreat. Jalrog pursued them, but in the end, they managed to escape. The beetles then realized what the Centipede King had done and counterattacked. But since Jalrog was not in the mood to deal with small fries, it returned to its territory in an extremely bad mood, killing any creature it passed by along the way. Naturally, the disturbance in Evavug's domain caught the attention of the broodmother, who sent its spiderlings to inquire about what happened. One of Evavug's bodyguards, who survived Jalrog's betrayal, spilled everything to the spiderlings, which the broodmother, Nizana, passed to the other kings and the Earth Dragons. Since then, Jalrog had been in the crosshairs of all the Jinns and Magians in the Rigel continent for its betrayal. Damn it! The Centipede King trashed underground, destroying parts of its underground network. It just returned from a meeting at the center of the continent, and Just as it expected, it received an earful from the other kings and the 3 earth dragons, who gave it an ultimatum. If it didn't cooperate with them in driving out the humans, they would brand the Centipede King as a traitor and hunt it down without mercy. "I'll show them," Jalrog screeched. "I'll eat their flesh, drink their blood, and make them understand that they cannot defy me." The other centipede monsters who heard the Centipede King's screech all scrambled to get as far away as they could. Whenever their master was in this kind of mood, it would not hesitate to attack anything, including them, to vent its frustrations. Just as the Centipede King was about to look for monsters to kill, it sensed a familiar presence moving in its direction. At first, Jalrog thought that it might have just made a mistake, but as the monster drew near it, its suspicions were confirmed. Dozens of meters away from it, a rank 7 sovereign entered its underground cavern. It was none other than Rocky, who had traveled personally to meet with the Centipede King. "It's you," Jalrog screeched angrily. "I will tear you apart for getting in my way." Rocky didn't reply and instead opened its mouth wide. The Centipede King thought that the Magma Balboa had decided to take the initiative to attack, but it suddenly noticed something come out of the monster's mouth, which made Jalrog's body stiffen. "Calm down, Jalrog. We didn't come here to fight." A humanoid creature, covered in black armor, said in a calm tone. "I have come here to make a proposal to you," 13 said. "How about we form an alliance?" The Centipede King was a savage creature. Its default instinct was to attack first and worry later. However, it didn't do that and stared at the humanoid creature, which it couldn't identify if it was human or a living armor. There was one reason why the Centipede King decided to hold back its instinct to attack. That was because the humanoid creature was emitting a power stronger than that of a Magian prince. In fact, this was the first time Jalrog felt something like this in its lifetime. It was a power of absolute dominance, making it believe that if it offended the humanoid creature, its life would end then and there. "Who are you?" Jalrog asked. The humanoid creature pressed its fist over its chest before giving the Centipede King a light bow. "I am just a messenger of my god, Metatron," 13 replied, "and he asked me to offer you a proposal." "Proposal? What proposal?" Jalrog lowered its head to take a closer look at the humanoid, who was exuding an aura that belonged to a powerful creature. "Tell me, Jalrog, what is it that you want?" 13 asked. "My master, Metatron, promises to grant your wish if you cooperate with us." Tiona, who had stayed inside the mobile fortress, crawled up on her master's body as soon as he returned. 8:18. She then flicked her tongue as she faced the teenage boy, asking him if everything went according to his plan. "Cooperation?" Jalrog's eyes glinted with killing intent. "What kind of cooperation?" "I will give you an opportunity to devour the other kings," 13 replied. "Not only that, my master, Metatron, will also grant your wish. All I ask is that you meet my one condition." "And what is that condition?" Jalrog eyed the metallic humanoid with great interest. 13 smiled internally before telling the Centipede King what he wanted to achieve. When he was done talking, Jalrog laughed. The humanoid's offer was simply too good to be true. "Very well. If you can do your part of the deal, I don't mind agreeing to this proposal of yours," Jalrog stated. "Good." 13 nodded. "Brace yourself, Jalrog. The thing you've been waiting for will finally fall in your hands." Rocky swallowed 13 whole before leaving the Centipede King's lair without even a backward glance. Truth be told, the Magma Balboa was feeling very anxious, fearing that the Centipede King would not let them leave its lair alive. However, 13 assured Rocky that everything was going to be fine. Right now, Jalrog didn't really have a choice, and the teenage boy had given the Centipede King an offer it couldn't refuse. Tiona, who had stayed inside the mobile fortress, crawled up on her master's body as soon as he returned. She then flicked her tongue as she faced the teenage boy, asking him if everything went according to his plan. "We'll know the answer soon enough," Tiona, 13 replied. "For now, we just need to show him how serious we are." The teenage boy had blackmailed Evavug that if it didn't tell him everything that he wanted to know, he would boil the brain beetle's egg and feed it to his subordinates. Fortunately, Evavug cared for its egg deeply, so it answered all of 13's questions without telling a single lie. After knowing that the kings and the Earth Dragons weren't truly united, he decided to gamble and set his plan into action. If he succeeded, not only would he gain a strong ally, but he would also be able to sow discord among the Jinns and Magents, allowing him to take them all, one by one. 2 days after 13 met up with Jalrog, more good news arrived at his doorstep. Out of the 40 monsters he had requested from the Alliance, 10 more had been sent his way, which he immediately added to his divine artifact. All in all, including Tiona, he now had 15 monsters that he could summon anytime and anywhere to help him fight his opponents. It also meant that there were now 15 abilities that his private army could use, such as Kiss of Death, Mirror, Breath of Petrification, Perfect Camouflage, Telekinesis, Enhanced Senses, Enhanced Reflexes, Enhanced Speed, Unblocked Passage, Teleportation, Telepathy, Aquatic Breathing, Barrier, Healing Wind, Adamant Body. Even if all the monsters under his command were only rank 1 monsters, this set of skills was more than enough for them to fight above their current rank. Once 13 had filled up the 100 monster quota of his divine artifact, his monster army would be a force to reckon with, allowing him to fight against stronger opponents even if he were alone. But 13 still had another option. He could simply capture more monsters in the Rigel continent and temporarily add them to his collection, maximizing the effects of his divine artifact. The teenage boy could easily kick out these monsters whenever he wanted, so he wouldn't suffer any loss from filling up its slots temporarily. This was a win-win situation for him, for it would allow him to fight with his full potential once their mission began. In fact, he planned to go on a hunting expedition with Rocky and Hans right after he finished his meeting with his subordinates. 2 days from now, we will launch the expedition to recapture the northern regions of the Rigel continent, 13 stated. I don't need to tell you how important this upcoming battle is. The entire world is paying close attention to the events happening here in the Rigel continent. In fact, battle reporters will be accompanying our forces to report the battle in real time. The members of the 69th Battalion and the Valkyries didn't expect that reporters would also come to broadcast their battle, which made them anxious. The teenage boy, who didn't know what his subordinates were thinking, continued his speech after a brief pause. Our victory will also be their victory, 13 declared, and our loss will also be their loss. But we will not lose. We will win, and it will be a resounding victory. So tonight, eat and drink to your heart's content. Talk to your families and assure them that you will come back to them safely. When tomorrow comes, prepare your weapons, sharpen your blades, and rest properly. I'll meet you all on the second day, so make sure that all of you are ready by then. 13 saluted, and everyone else reciprocated his gesture. Dismiss, 13 ordered. As soon as he finished giving his order, he approached Hans, who summoned his giant hawk and took off to the skies with his young master. There were only 2 days left before the battle started, so 13 needed to add as many monsters as possible to his immortal parade of 100 demons. Meanwhile, the Dvala main headquarters was bustling with activity. All the warships were being double-checked to ensure that all of them had sufficient ammunition for the upcoming battle. 13 had relegated Renz to handle the final preparations for the battle, and the latter was doing his best to accomplish the task that had been given to him. He had talked to Zion and made a deal with him. If the teenage boy were able to reclaim the northern regions successfully with minimal casualties, he would accept his offer to become Zion's secret agent and follower. 13 agreed to his condition, and that was how their talks ended. The Ashford clan and the Staller clan were also paying attention to the battle that would commence in 2 days. In fact, they were secretly hoping that the Alliance would lose so that Zion's arrogance would be brought down a peg. When that happens, they would generously offer their assistance and help reclaim the lands of the Rigel continent. By then, they would have the edge in the negotiations when discussion about the division of spoils of war took place. The monarch of the Signy continent was also paying close attention to this large-scale attack as well. Unlike the Ashford and the Staller clan, Griffin Douglas wished for Zion's expedition to succeed, for the victory in the Rigel continent would raise the morale of his troops. In a camp located in one of the major cities of the Sigmi continent, a group of 6 teenagers looked at the television in front of them with great interest. A reporter was currently interviewing Shauna, asking for her opinion about the upcoming battle to reclaim the northern regions of the Rigel continent. Is it just me, or Shauna has become more beautiful since the last time we saw her? A young lady with dark blue hair asked with a smile. She looks the same to me. Another girl, who had long blonde hair, replied. But there is indeed something different about her. Perhaps the environment of the Rigel continent made her experience many things. A teenage boy with dark brown hair and green eyes replied as he sharpened his weapon. Maybe being in the front lines made her more mature. Still, the situation there has escalated rather quickly. A young lady with long black hair and blue eyes commented. And it's all because of one person, Zion Leventis. Hey, Roland, maybe we should invite him to join our party. What do you think? The hero of the hero party, Roland, didn't say anything and simply watched Shauna on the television. No good. He's too focused on Shauna. The teenage girl with dark blue hair shook her head helplessly. He can't hear us. I can hear you just fine, Roland replied. If this mission of theirs succeeds, then I will consider adding him to our party. Is that fine with you, Joshua? The sage of the hero party, Joshua, fixed the glasses on his face before giving his reply. I don't mind either, Joshua replied. But I have a feeling that he will turn down our invitation. Why would he do that? The blonde-haired girl asked. We're the hero party. We get a lot of resources from the central government, and all of us have a special rank in the military. How could he not want to join our team? Intuition, Joshua replied. Compared to his achievements, we are greatly lacking. If he succeeds in this mission, the gap between us will only increase more. Also, my informers in the Valkyries have told me that Zion Leventis is now commanding their division. Although he and Shauna don't spend a lot of time together, they said that she respects him very much and would often ask him for advice whenever he's around. Perhaps her maturity is also thanks to Zion's influence. Roland frowned after hearing his best friend's explanation, while the 3 girls gave each other a knowing glance. Do you think the 2 of them are a couple now? Oi, don't be like that. If I remember correctly, Zion is only 13 years old. They have a 3-year gap between them. It's just a 3-year gap. Besides, isn't it normal for 13-year-olds to have a romantic partner? It happens all the time, especially during the first wandering. Can you girls quiet down? The warrior, who was sharpening his blade, clicked his tongue. You 3 are like Annie's always gossiping about juicy gossip. Can you get a break? Shut up, Derek, the blonde-haired girl said. This is why you are forever alone. You don't know how to talk to girls properly. Derek rolled his eyes at their sorceress, who had a fiery personality. Roland sighed as he listened to the bickering of his party. However, he was feeling a bit anxious at the thought of Shauna fighting on the front lines without them. He had asked for permission for their party to be relocated to the Rigel continent in order to assist Shauna, but the Grand Marshal told them that they should remain in the Sigmi continent to raise the morale of their troops there. Be safe, Shauna, Roland thought as she looked at the young lady whom he had developed a crush on. I pray for your success. Although they weren't together, he sincerely hoped that their saintess would emerge victorious in this battle, which would impact not only the Rigel continent, but also the entire world. The Blood Wolf, who had been crippled by Hans, roared in anger as it was being absorbed by the black flag in 13's hand. But no matter how hard it struggled, it was unable to free itself from the hold of the divine artifact due to its injuries. It was a rank 4 monster, but Hans easily dealt with it by cutting off its limbs and cutting all its chances of escaping. When the wolf finally turned into particles of light and merged with 13's black flag, the teenage boy finally breathed a sigh of relief. We're done here, Hans, 13 said in a strained voice. Let's go back. Yes, young master, Hans replied before summoning his giant hawk. They spent half of the day hunting for suitable monsters to temporarily add to 13's divine artifact, because it could only show its might when all 100 slots were taken. Although these monsters didn't possess the abilities that the teenage boy was looking for, having 100 abilities was still better than having just 15 abilities. A monster with that many abilities even if they were only a rank 1 monster, was a force to reckon with. This was also the reason why 13's former host was hunted down by the heroes of his world. With the immortal parade of 100 demons in his hands, he was simply too dangerous. 13 knew that he needed to have proper rest before the fight started, so they didn't go too deep into enemy territory. He simply asked Hans to cripple different monster types so that he could add their abilities to his divine artifact. The butler, who knew about the restrictions in his young master's body, didn't ask any questions about how Zion was able to wield the black flag. He simply followed the teenage boy's orders, and this attitude made 13 give the butler a thumbs up in his heart. When they finally arrived at the aircraft carrier, he immediately ordered the Leventis naval fleet to head to their respective positions in preparation for the upcoming battle. He also ordered everyone to take a proper rest so that they would have enough strength when they were ordered to mobilize in both land and air. 13 set up his alarm, planning to sleep for at least 8 hours. As the supreme commander of the operation, whether they would succeed or not depended on his orders. "Let's sleep, Tiona," 13 said as he lightly patted the black snake who was coiled up in his chest. "Tomorrow, we head to battle." Tiona nodded and obeyed her master's order. She had seen how her master had worked tirelessly behind the scenes in order to ensure that the number of casualties would be reduced to its limit. Contrary to the teenage boy who was soundly sleeping in his room, there were many people who were unable to sleep a wink. Shauna was one of them. The saintess of the hero party was unable to sleep because she was feeling too anxious. The impromptu battle that had taken place in the Dvalin port still haunted her in her dreams. It was bloody, and she tried to help as much as she could, but she was simply too helpless. Shauna had fought alongside everyone and healed as many injured as she could. But when the Birdman crashed on the port and stood several meters away from her, she felt as if her heart had stopped beating. The Birdman had only given her a sidelong glance back then and focused its attention on the teenage boy standing only 3 meters away from it. The rank 8 sovereign reached out to crush the boy's neck, treating him like an insignificant insect. "Hi, bye." But despite the screams, roars, and screeches around her, she had heard those 2 words clearly. Before she knew it, the rank 8 sovereign vanished without a trace. The only one left standing was Zion Leventis. With the disappearance of the monster's leader, the tide of battle quickly shifted in favor of the Dvalin Federation. After the battle ended, Shauna remembered the stories her sister had told her about Zion Leventis. Rihanna had nothing but praise for the boy. However, her sister's excessive awe towards Zion irritated Shauna to no end. But after seeing that scene, that death-defying scene where a boy who was 3 years younger than her faced death in the eye yet survived, she finally understood why her sister only sang praises for him. Her seniors, Viola, Sharon, and Louise, who had accompanied Zion to fight against the brain beetle, Evavug, would often tell Shauna that their temporary commander was very dependable and many times better than Roland, the hero of Shauna's party. They even added that if there would come a time when she had to choose between the two, she should choose Zion because he was the better choice than Roland. Shauna hadn't said anything back then, but she also believed that what they said was the truth. She had been with Roland and knew how strong he really was. But despite Zion being weaker, Shauna instinctively felt that she would be safer by his side than by Roland's or even their entire hero party combined. Did I get infected by the Zion disease? Shauna thought before shaking her head helplessly. I better try to sleep even if I'm struggling to. After all, tomorrow is Judgment Day. The saintess laid down on her bed and closed her eyes. After feeling restless for an hour, sleep finally held her in her embrace. Perhaps, waiting for that moment, her communicator blinked thrice, indicating that someone was trying to contact her. However, since she had temporarily disabled all notification sounds for 3 hours, she didn't hear it and slept an uneasy sleep. Somewhere in the Signy continent. She's not picking up. Joshua, the sage of the hero party, said. Maybe she's already asleep. It's really hard to contact her because of the time difference, Roland commented. When we're awake, she's asleep, and when we're asleep, she's awake. Too bad, the blonde-haired girl stated. And here I was, planning to wish her good luck for the battle. Well, Today is our day off, so maybe we should take a nap later, the warriors said. That way, we can stay up late to watch the live broadcast and see how their battle will progress. Everyone in the world will be watching this battle, so I'm sure that our superiors won't mind if we slack off for a day. Roland and Joshua nodded at the same time. That's a good idea, Joshua nodded. Let's take it easy for today. Yes. Everywhere in the world, similar scenarios were happening. Gambling houses even opened, intending to take advantage of this momentous event. Some bet that the expedition would fail, while others bet on its success. It would not be an exaggeration to say that the entirety of Pangea was paying close attention to this event, which was only half a day from starting. Meanwhile, while all the wanderers were waiting for the battle to start, the monsters of the Rigel continent were also starting to move. The Centipede King, Jalrog, eyed the movement of its forces, as well as the forces of its allies. It had shared the information that the Wanderers would launch an expedition that would reclaim the northern regions of the continent in a few hours. At first, the kings didn't want to believe the Centipede King because its credibility had dropped after trying to devour Evavug in the past. But after Jalrog stated that if the humans did indeed launch an attack, and they didn't heed its warning, it would no longer participate in any battle to drive them out in the future. In the end, the kings and the Earth Dragons decided to trust Jalrog and order their forces to march toward the northern regions in preparation for the humans' attempt to reclaim their lands. Due to their territory being the farthest from the north, the Wyvern King and the Death Lord would arrive a bit later than the rest. Evavug's forces, which are now under the control of the rank 7 Blisterbug, were also moving toward the north because the Earth Dragons ordered it so. The Centipede King watched these events unfold with anticipation and looked forward to the completion of its deal with the messenger of the god of the apocalypse, who promised to grant its wish of gaining power beyond its wildest dreams. If you're just making this up, we will kill you, the Wolf King stated. You already broke our trust once. Don't think that you can get away with doing it a second time. You'll soon realize that I'm telling the truth, Jalrog replied as it traveled alongside the Wolf King and the Brood Mother. Also, there won't be a next time. I can promise you that. As you should, the Brood Mother commented. Still, how did you come across the information? I caught a few of their scouts loitering in my territory, so I interrogated them, Jalrog answered. Humans are weak-willed. All I need to do is promise them that I will give them a chance to live if they answer my questions, and they start talking. What happened to those humans? The Wolf King asked. I ate them, of course. Jalrog smirked. It has been a while since I have eaten wanderers. The Wolf King and the Brood Mother didn't ask more about the matter because whether the Centipede King was telling the truth or not would be known the next day. For now, they hastened their paces because traveling with the bloodthirsty centipede was something that made them uncomfortable. The Centipede King didn't mind and allowed its 2 comrades to march ahead of him until they could no longer be seen. Yes, there won't be a next time, Jalrog mused, because by tomorrow, both of you will be mine. After making sure that there weren't any other monsters nearby, Jalrog dug deep underground to meet up with the magma balboa near its lair. A few minutes later, it arrived at their meeting place and eyed the rank 7 sovereign, the servant of the creature who went by the name 13. Aside from the Wyvern King and the Death Lord, almost everyone is amassing their armies in the north, Jalrog said. Are you sure your master can keep his end of the bargain? Rocky nodded. Yes. Good. Jalrog nodded back. We'll see if our interests really coincide with each other. I'm looking forward to tomorrow's battle. The Centipede King's eyes glinted with killing intent as it remembered the faces of its comrades. All of them hated Jalrog for what it had done to Evavug, but the Centipede King didn't give a damn about what they were thinking. I will devour all of you anyway, so why should I care about the opinion of food? Jalrog thought before leaving Rocky behind, with a sinister smirk plastered on its insectoid face. The Magma Balboa, who was doing his best to not feel intimidated by Jalrog's oppressive aura earlier, finally relaxed after the Centipede King was gone. Rocky was currently on standby and waiting for 13's further orders. It had just finished setting up dormant mines in the north an hour before meeting up with Jalrog. These mines were a bit special because they were developed by the Dvalin Federation in preparation for a day like this. When Renz shared this information with 13, the teenage boy asked that he be given half of the Dvalin Federation stockpile of these special mines. Wendell didn't bat an eye and agreed to the request of their supreme commander. They couldn't afford to not go all out in this operation, so he didn't hesitate to share this special weapon with the teenage boy. These mines were hard to detect, even by monsters living in the ground. They would only explode when exposed to a certain frequency, which only the higher UPS of the Dvalin Federation could identify. The Earth Dragons remained at the center of the continent because they believed that the kings and their forces were more than enough to handle the humans. They had driven them out in the past, and they were confident that they could do it again. At least, that was what they believed. As the hours passed, the sun finally rose from the east and shared its light with the world. 13 woke up from the sound of his alarm clock and yawned loudly. He had a good night's sleep, and he even dreamed. However, for some reason, he couldn't remember what he dreamed about. Well, I guess it's not that important, 13 thought before getting up from the bed to take a quick shower. He knew that he might not get a chance to freshen up later, so he decided to take a bath while he still could. The water was cold, but it didn't matter to him. Its low temperature only made his mind sharper and more awake. After wearing the clothes he had prepared to wear that day, 13 headed to the cafeteria and saw that the 69th Battalion and the Valkyries were already there to eat. The moment they saw him, all of them stood up to give him a salute, which he returned in a casual manner. "Eat up, and make sure that you'll be able to last for half a day's battle," 13 declared. "Feel free to bring some energy bars, because anything can happen." After saying those words, 13 went to eat with Tiona, feeling at ease. His soldiers were paying close attention to their commander, but they couldn't see any signs of anxiety in his facial expression. It was as if the teenage boy was just about to take a stroll somewhere in the Rigel continent. He didn't look like someone who was about to command the allied armies of the Dvalin Federation, the Aldebaran Alliance, and the central government. After spending many months with him, the 69th Battalion had fully recognized Zion Leventis as a very capable commander. The Valkyries, who had recently joined them, felt the same. They had suffered greatly due to the incident at the Dvalin port, and Marion had even written her letter of resignation. But after Ivavug was defeated, 13 gave all the credit to the Valkyries, allowing them to regain their honor and dignity. So in their eyes, Zion Leventis was a special existence that allowed them to atone for their past mistakes. 13, who was unaware of the overflowing respect and gratitude that the people in the cafeteria had for him, ate happily while he communicated with Jubii, who was commanding the Nautilus far out into the sea. An all-out attack on land, air, and sea was about to begin in a few hours, and if everything went according to his plans, a good chunk of the Rigel continent would be as good as his own private property. All armies from the Dvalin Federation, the central government, and the Aldebaran forces, who had come to participate in the mission to liberate the northern regions of the Rigel continent, gazed at the teenage boy standing in front of them. He was none other than Zion Leventis, the supreme commander who would command them on the battlefield. This feat was unprecedented. Not only was he the first in the history of the world of Pangea to gain this much authority, but he also achieved it at an extremely young age. When he had only been 7 years old, rumors of him fighting and winning against a Magian prince spread. When he was 10, he had defeated an army of Artemians who had intended to establish a stronghold in the world of Solterra. And now, at 13 years old, he had orchestrated the defeat of 3 out of the 8 kings of the Rigel continent. Until now, the rumors of what happened during his earlier years were still doubted by many. However, the accomplishments he recently achieved been verified by not only the Dvalin Federation and the leaders of the Aldebaran continent, but also by the central government itself. And now, this teenage boy currently stood on the platform, and in front of everyone he addressed the united armies under his banner. "I am not someone for long speeches," 13 said as he rested his hands on his waist. "All of you already know what we're going to do today." Despite the countless gazes that were locked onto his body, he was calm and collected, speaking with confidence. "Many of you will die," 13 declared. "Sacrifices will be made. However, I will guarantee that before the sun sets on the horizon, I will have led you all to victory." An eerie silence spread in the surroundings as everyone's gazes became even more fixated on the legendary rookie of Pangea. "Wanderers, this is just the beginning of your journeys," 13 said as he scanned the armies below him. "It's time for us to show the jinns and magents that we are no longer the weak humans that they have bullied in the past. It's time to show them that humanity is now ready to fight back. It's time to show them that they should think twice before trying to conquer our world." 13 raised his right fist and shouted his declaration. "Soldiers, comrades, today we stand on the brink of history. Before us lies a challenge that will test our courage, our strength, and our unity. But remember this, we are not just fighting for ourselves. We are fighting for our families, our friends, and our world. The enemy we're about to face is formidable, but they do not possess the heart and spirit that each one of you carries. They may have numbers, and they may be vicious, cruel, and merciless, but we have something far greater. We have resolve, we have honor, and we have each other. Look at the person beside you. This is your brother, your sister, your family in arms. We fight not as individuals, but as a united force. Our strength lies in our unity, our determination, and our unwavering belief in the cause for which we fight. Today, we will write our own story, a story of bravery, of sacrifice, and of triumph. We will show the world what it means to stand tall in the face of adversity, to reclaim what is ours as we make our stand. Wanderers, let us move forward with courage in our hearts and fire in our souls. For our families, for our homeland, for each other, let us march into battle and show these hateful monsters what we are made of. Victory awaits us. Let's go and claim it. Yes. Are you with me? Yes. To death. 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 Somewhere in the Aldebaran continent, Alessia, who was watching her son on the television, covered her lips as tears streamed down her cheeks. She had never felt so proud of her life as she felt today. Her son, who had single-handedly made their lives better, was now about to make history. Seeing Zion stand there, wearing the uniform of the Supreme Commander of the Alliance, Alessia couldn't help but remember that day in the hospital when he looked so fragile, so weak, and so helpless. In the span of 8 years, her son had grown to be an outstanding individual, someone that their family was very proud of. "Bwada!" Ria shouted as she pointed at the TV. "Bwada!" Remy smiled faintly as she hugged her little sister from behind. "That's right, Ria," Remy said. "That's our brother." Gerald, who was in his smithy and working very hard to finish his latest creation, glanced at the television and grinned. "Show them, son," Gerald stated. "Show them how our family does things." Renz walked up behind the teenage boy and gave him a respectful bow. "Commander, our forces are ready to advance," Renz said. "Your orders?" 13 smirked as he sat on a makeshift throne that was carried on top of the platform. 69th Battalion, Valkyries, advance, 13 ordered. As soon as he gave the order, the 69th Battalion and the Valkyries took to the skies from their aircraft carriers and led the charge. "Aerial squadrons, sortie," 13 declared. Countless flying monsters of different kinds flew high in the sky and followed the 69th Battalion and the Valkyries, engaging in their assault formation. The moment the 69th Battalion arrived at the airspace of the northern regions, countless flying monsters, who were part of the Birdman's remaining forces, all rose up to meet them. "Vulture formation," 13 ordered. As soon as the order was given, all the flying monsters that belonged to the Alliance dove down from the sky. The jinns and magents, who had come to engage them in combat, were momentarily caught off guard by the unexpected move of their enemies. "All warships, open fire," 13 shouted. A thunderous roar answered 13's command as hundreds of warships fired their main cannons and launched their missiles, aimed at the flying enemies, giving their enemies a welcome they didn't expect. In just the span of a few seconds, the sky was covered in a thick mist of blood, made from hundreds of monsters exploding out of the sheer firepower that assaulted their bodies. Christopher, who was leading the 69th Battalion, and Marion, who was leading the Valkyries, flew a few meters above ground, circling back to the sea and leading the aerial squadron to safety. Their only purpose was to serve as bait in order to lure the flying monsters that were being led by a rank 7 Great Eagle. When Zed suddenly disappeared, his subordinates had lost their pillar of support. Although someone was leading them in battle, the Great Eagle wasn't as well-versed in commanding the other monsters, leading to the destruction of their formation. Christopher, who had seen the Great Eagle from a distance, aimed his sniper rifle and pulled the trigger. A dark bullet pierced through the giant eagle's body, but the giant monster was unfazed by this sneak attack from 13th's right-hand man. Mission accomplished, Christopher reported. Good job, Christopher, 13 replied. The Supreme Commander of the Alliance glanced at the projection of the battlefield in front of him and saw a red blinking dot in the sky. The bullet Christopher had shot was only a tracker bullet, allowing them to pinpoint the exact location of the leader of the flying monsters. Go for the kill, Uncle, 13 said through the communicator. Understood, Michael replied before he fixed the glasses on his face. Fire the main cannons. Firing the main cannons, his subordinate replied. Suddenly, a red beam of light trailed across the sky as the main cannon of the Levinas aircraft carrier used its most powerful cannon, which 13 had designed 2 years ago. This cannon only had a quarter of Nautilus firepower, but it was enough to do the job that it was made for. The Great Eagle, who was about to chase Christopher and the others, suddenly felt something dangerous headed in its direction. However, despite knowing the danger, there was nothing it could do. The attack that had been aimed in its direction was simply incredibly fast and incredibly deadly. The red beam collided with the Great Eagle's right wing, vaporizing it, and with it, the monster was forced to come crashing down from the sky. However, it didn't end there. All the monsters that were along the red beam's path were annihilated instantly, leaving only blood mist spraying in the air. Sir, the cannon is overheating. The officer who was stationed to fire the main cannon gave his report. We won't be able to fire it right away. Understood, Michael replied as he fixed his glasses. Let it cool off for a while. Yes, sir. 13, who had been informed that the Great Eagle had fallen on the ground, gave the 69th Battalion and the Valkyries the order to eliminate it without mercy. A few miles away from the battlefield, Jalrog glanced at the Wolf King and Broodmother with triumph. See? I told you. The humans are going to attack, Jalrog. Fine, we believe you now, the Wolf King replied as it glanced at the Broodmother. We will act according to the plan. Good, the Broodmother replied before giving a loud screech. Countless spiders started to burrow into the ground in preparation to ambush the ground forces of the Wanderers, who would pass through their trap as soon as they defeated the flying monsters that were barring their way. Jalrog laughed internally. Everything was going according to the plan of the messenger who had spoken to it a few days ago. Now, all it needed to do was play its role and wait for the 2 kings who had looked down on it to suffer a fate that they didn't see coming. The flying monsters who had lost yet another leader couldn't do anything but explode in the air as the unending bombardment of the warships continued raining down on them. While this was happening, Arthur and the field marshal of the central government, Tristan, dealt with the rank 7 Great Eagle, who had now lost its ability to fly. The 2 thrones made short work of it, which was the role that 13 had asked them to play. Their job was to deal with the fallen high-ranking monster from the Birdman's forces and kill them as soon as possible. The Djinns and Magients had grown complacent over the years after being used to dealing with only the forces of the Dvalin Federation back then. And now that they were dealing with nearly a third of the world's entire armed forces who were using state-of-the-art weapons that they had developed over the years, they were unable to hold their ground. The battle had only lasted for nearly 20 minutes, ending when the Djinns finally decided to retreat after their leader was killed. Within that short period of time, only a fifth of their original forces remained, proving just how formidable the counterattack of the Wanderers was. The ground forces arrived at the beach one by one and secured the perimeter. They then constructed several portable teleporters, which would allow the other soldiers from the Dvalin port to teleport directly to the island. This was an efficient method to bolster their numbers and allow elite personnel, like Thrones and Monarchs, to join the battle right away. Currently, the Monarchs and the Thrones, with the exception of Arthur and Tristan, were still on standby, saving their strength in order to fight the monster kings that were waiting for them on land. "This opening act sure is something," Wendell commented. "The amount of Imperium lost in that barrage is staggering. In order to reclaim a mile of land, we have already used nearly half of our stockpile." "It doesn't matter," Lawrence replied. "Human lives are more important than Imperium." "Well, the battle has just started," Benedict commented. "Let's just wait for the orders of our Supreme Commander." 13, who was being transported to the Dvalin port by Renz, eyed the battlefield like a hawk. "So far, so good, Commander," Renz reported. "We haven't suffered any casualties yet, but our Imperium reserves had just passed the halfway mark. I'm afraid that we won't have enough ammunition to fend off the hordes of monsters that are waiting for us on land." "Don't worry," 13 replied. "What we have is enough." The teenage boy then tapped his communicator and ordered the warships to stop firing their cannons. As soon as the order was given, the aerial forces of the Alliance once again rose up to the sky and surveyed the surroundings. Only death and destruction could be seen, and countless craters littered the ground. "We are reporting live at the Rigel continent," one of the reporters said as his cameraman showed the world the results of the opening half of the battle to their viewers. "As you can see, the Alliance has driven off the enemy's vanguard and has established a foothold. Although I'm not 100% certain, I believe that we haven't suffered a single casualty from this exchange. It seems that our Supreme Commander has achieved his goal for the opening act. Since the battle reporters were not allowed to advance ahead of the battlefield, they only stayed near the beach area, where the soldiers were amassing their forces. When 13 reached the Dvalin port, he was immediately brought to the command center, where a projection of the northern regions of the Rigel continent was highlighted. Renz, who was accompanying him, stood 2 steps away from the Supreme Commander's chair and observed the changes in the battlefield. Over a dozen aides were stationed in the command center, and their role was to give 13 live updates of the battle from their correspondents on the field. "Sir, we don't see any monsters within a 5-mile radius from the shore," Christopher reported. "Your orders?" "Deploy the frequency bombs," 13 ordered. "Yes, sir," Christopher replied before raising his hand to command the 69th Battalion to follow him. "We will deploy the frequency bombs." 300 Gerfalcons streaked past the sky and dropped hundreds of frequency bombs to the ground. The moment these bombs crashed down, they immediately unleashed a high-level frequency that spread far and wide. A few seconds later, the ground rumbled as the mines Rocky had planted detonated one by one. The spiders, who were waiting in ambush, screeched in pain and surprise as they were caught up with the explosions, which they had not seen coming. The broodmother, who was at the center of the spider formation, hurriedly gave the orders to rise up to the surface so that not all of his subordinates would be killed under the ground. Jalrog had said that this was the perfect spot to ambush the Wanderers when they started to advance deeper into their territory. The broodmother didn't believe everything the king's centipede had said, but after it had sent the scouts and confirmed that this was indeed an ideal location for an ambush, it ordered all of its forces to hide under this wide stretch of land. The trap they had set was perfect, and the broodmother believed that the battle would end the moment their prey walked upon their trap. Unfortunately, the one who walked into the trap was not the Wanderers, but the broodmother and its subordinates, who were now desperately trying to reach the surface. But just as the broodmother was about to burst out from the ground, the dormant mines that had been especially planted to trap her exploded at the same time, causing her big body to suffer several injuries. As a rank 8 sovereign, the dormant mines weren't strong enough to kill it. But it didn't change the fact that it had caused damage to it. Unlike the Centipede King, the broodmother didn't have a very tough exoskeleton, so it didn't escape the explosions unharmed. However, as soon as it rose to the surface, it was met with a bombardment by the 69th Battalion, the Valkyries, and the aerial units of the Alliance. Arthur and Lawrence also joined the battle, making the broodmother screech in pain and anger. Before even facing their enemies, more than half of its spiderlings had perished due to the mines that had detonated underground. Also, their enemies were flying too high in the air, so none of its attacks could reach them. The broodmother could only watch in anger as more of its subordinates perished with each passing second. Meanwhile, away from this commotion, the 3 earth dragons, who were in touch with the broodmother, suddenly tensed and hurriedly created an earth wall that was dozens of meters thick. A second later, a beam of light crashed over their defenses, forcing the 3 rank 9 sovereigns to work together to prevent the attack from reaching the dimensional gate that they were protecting. The dome of earth they erected only lasted for a few seconds before it shattered, sending one of the earth dragons, who was as big as a fortress, flying backward. The other 2 earth dragons were also pushed back, and the beam of light collided with the dimensional gate, making the 3 of them panic. The dimensional gate, which was originally over 200 meters tall, shrank until it was only 100 meters tall, the same size as the earth dragons. Despite suffering minor injuries, the 3 earth dragons hurriedly took a defensive position, facing the direction where the beam of light was coming from. The main cannons have overheated, Jubii, T1 said. We will not be able to use them anytime soon. It's fine. Jubii, who was watching the result of the attack of Nautilus main cannons through Athena's surveillance from space, smiled faintly. We have accomplished our mission. Those earth dragons will be too scared to leave their spot. They are no longer a threat to Master. 13 had ordered Jubii to target the dimensional gate, even if the main cannons of Nautilus melted in the attempt. Right now, he needed to keep the earth dragons occupied for at least a few hours so that they wouldn't be able to give orders to their forces who were busy fighting in the north. At the same time that the main cannons of Nautilus targeted the dimensional gate, a black snake emerged from the ground, just behind the location of the broodmother. Suddenly, a black flag materialized behind her, and 99 monsters emerged from it. At Tiona's hiss, all of these monsters used the Mirror Slime's mirror ability, instantly doubling their number in a heartbeat. After the flag disappeared, the monsters activated perfect camouflage, then made their way toward the broodmother from behind. They were 13 secret forces who would play a major role in tilting the balance of the war in their favor. The broodmother didn't expect that its well-laid-out ambush that was supposed to decimate the enemy forces the moment they advanced would completely fall into ruin. Their plan was perfect and had no gaps. After the Wanderers advanced at its position, the Wolf King would attack them from behind with a pincer attack, giving their enemies no path of escape. The remnants of the deceased Manticore King would then join this assault, immediately doubling their land forces. But that wasn't all. The Centipede King and its Centipede army would kill any survivors who managed to escape and completely wipe them out. After that, the Wyvern King, who would arrive next, would wipe out all their enemies' flying forces, completely decimating their ranks. The Death Lord wouldn't even need to do anything and simply watch from afar. This was the plan that they had agreed upon, and they thought that, with it, they could wipe out the humans who still dreamed of reclaiming their lands. However, their expectations didn't match reality. Seeing its subordinates die around it, the broodmother couldn't help but screech in anger. On top of that, its reinforcements from the Wolf King were nowhere to be found. Foolish monster, 13 said arrogantly as he lightly tapped on the projection in front of him. Such childish strategies are outdated. The place where the teenage boy had tapped was the exact location of the broodmother, who was currently at the center of the chaos caused by the Chaos Mines. Alpha Team, pull out, 13 ordered. Uncle, please launch Mephisto. Understood, Michael replied. All the flying forces of the Alliance, which 13 had given the general codename Alpha Team, immediately retreated without hesitation. A moment later, the aircraft carrier of the Leventis family launched a missile that 13 had given the codename Mephisto. It was a weapon customly created in order to specifically target the kings of the Rigel continent. Due to the massive resources that were needed to construct such a missile, the Leventis family had only made 2 of them. Renz and the members of the Alliance, who weren't informed about this weapon from the Leventis family, could only look at the trail in the sky that was created by the missile. The broodmother's senses tingled, informing it that something that could threaten its life was fast approaching. It then immediately coated its body in a steel-like mineral, raising its defenses to its limit. Foolish spider, 13 sneered. Do you really think that your petty trick could defend you from Mephisto? A blinding flash of light erupted, covering the entire battlefield in white for a brief moment. Renz, who was standing beside the teenage boy, shuddered as he looked at the flying military drones, which were monitoring the battlefield in real time. A dust cloud that rose up several miles into the atmosphere blocked everyone's vision. Arthur, who was riding on his flying serpent, ordered it to disperse the dust cloud so that he could see the result of their family's 2-year effort. What he didn't know was that the missile alone wasn't enough to kill a rank 8 sovereign that easily. 13 made sure that the entire missile was covered with rune magic, allowing its damage to increase several folds. Even if the blueprint for the Mephisto missile was stolen or shared with the public, the result wouldn't be the same. Everyone's gazes landed on the spider that was at the center of a giant crater. A good chunk of its body was blown apart, and only 3 of its legs remained. Even though it survived, it had received a fatal injury, which would end its life after a few minutes. A loud cheer erupted in the surroundings as Renz and the staff at the command center all raised their hands in triumph. The same thing was happening all around the world as everyone witnessed that one of the remaining kings of the Rigel continent had been defeated. "Commander, we did it!" One of the staff shouted as he looked at the teenage boy with awe. "We defeated it." "Calm down, son," 13 replied despite talking to someone who was older than him. "It's just a rank 8 sovereign. It's not a big deal. Return to your post and monitor the battlefield. This battle has just begun." "Yes, sir." The officer saluted as he returned to this duty. He didn't even mind being called son by the teenage boy who could easily pass off as his own child. "You're too humble, Commander," Renz commented from the side. "I'm not being humble," Renz, 13 replied. "Watch closely because you will be doing the same in the future. As I said earlier, this isn't really a big deal." The second in command of the Dvalin Federation smiled faintly and nodded his head. If other people dared to say that in front of him, he would have slapped them silly and ordered the officers in the command center to kick them out. However, he didn't dare to do that to the teenage boy, who seemed to be playing a game of chess against a complete beginner. What everyone didn't know was that 13 genuinely thought that this one-sided battle was not a big deal. If he had been given more time, he would have made a more powerful version of Mephisto and other armaments that would have made everyone cough up blood due to how much resources it required to make them. 13 had been too busy working on Athena and Nautilus, so he left the missile's creation to the Levinas family. Aside from adding rune magic to the finished product, he didn't do anything more than that. While the image on the screens projected that the broodmother was no longer capable of fighting, a flying serpent descended from the sky and headed straight to it. Arthur, who understood that the broodmother was on its last legs, didn't think twice and attacked with the intention of giving it the finishing blow. But before he could do that, the ground under the broodmother opened up, making its giant body fall. The centipede king, who had been waiting for that exact moment, dragged its comrade deep underground and left the battlefield in haste. Everyone was surprised about this sudden development because they didn't expect that another king would appear to save its comrade. 13, on the other hand, only smiled faintly before giving his next set of orders. "Alpha Team, head northeast and deal with the Wolf King," 13 ordered. "All warships, aim your cannons at the coordinates that I will be giving you. Wait for my orders before you fire." "Understood." "Yes, sir." A series of acknowledgments reached the command center as Christopher and Marion led the aerial forces of the Alliance to deal with the ground forces that belonged to the Wolf King and the remnants of the King Manticore's army. The soldiers, who were still amassing on the beach area, remained on standby. While they could have helped the Alpha Team to eliminate the Wolf King and its followers, 13 didn't plan to make unnecessary sacrifices on his side. What he wanted everyone to see was a one-sided massacre of the Jinns and Magians, whom everyone had thought to be near invincible. Even Douglas Griffin, who was watching the live coverage of the battle, was busy telling his subordinates to record everything that was happening so that they could learn from it. The monarch of the Cygni continent believed that as long as he and his advisors studied Zion's strategy, they would be able to replicate it and use it against the same monsters who would be invading their lands very soon. Zion Leventis, It seems that I still underestimated you, Douglas muttered. The other factions, who weren't part of the Allied forces in the Rigel continent, were thinking of the same thing. They expected the battle to be bloody, with both sides dying en masse. But so far, they had already eliminated one of the kings that once terrorized them decades ago, yet not a single wanderer had died in battle. What they didn't know was that it could have been bloody if 13 hadn't made the necessary preparations for this counterattack. If he hadn't struck a deal with the Centipede King, Jalrog, the people at the beach would have already been attacked by countless centipedes, and their foothold would have easily been thwarted. If he didn't eliminate the Manticore King, who had the ability to boost its allies' strength in battle, making them twice as deadly and ferocious, the flying djinns and magents would have been harder to defeat, even with the bombardment of the Allied army. If Evavug hadn't been taken down, any wanderer who had crossed the land and skies within its range would have been prey to its mind control abilities. Last but not the least, if the Dimensional Gate hadn't been attacked, the Earth Dragons, who were capable of firing long-distance attacks that were almost comparable to continental ballistic missiles, would have given cover fire to their allies. However, even these powerful monsters didn't dare to do that. Why? Because they had their hands full in defending their Dimensional Gate from Nautilus main cannons, which were at maximum output. 13 was throwing all of his forces and resources into this war, because he knew that once the surrounding monsters had been cleared out, nothing would stop him from mining everything on the continent. Of course, he also planned to share a bit of resources with his allies, but the majority of the important resources would be under his control. The expenses and losses he incurred from this battle would be returned 100-fold, so he didn't mind going all out. Also, this was his way of showing his abilities to the entire world, which would allow him to gain perks after this mission ended. For the time being, the teenage boy glanced at the screen, showing the battle between the Alpha Team and the Wolf King. From the start, the land monsters were at a great disadvantage. The only thing they could do was run away and avoid the bombardment from the skies. Knowing that they had the upper hand, the Alpha Team didn't plan on letting their enemies go and went on a one-sided massacre. The Wolf King was enraged, but there was really nothing it could do aside from order its forces to retreat. It had seen the destructive weapon the enemies had used against the Broodmother, so it believed that its comrade might have already perished from it. Everything happened so quickly that it hadn't been able to come to the other party's aid on time. The pincer attack they planned was rendered useless because their enemies didn't advance on land and simply congregated at the beach area, securing their foothold. Only the aerial units of their enemies went deep into their defensive lines. Since they couldn't attack them from the ground, there was nothing they could do but retreat with their tails behind their legs. Damn it, the Wolf King cursed internally. These humans are different from the past. While the Wolf King was thinking along these lines, something unexpected happened. Over 100 monsters suddenly materialized in front of them out of thin air and unleashed a petrification breath that washed over their forces like a tide. Since it was a very strong monster, the Wolf King wasn't affected by this breath attack. However, the Rank 1, Rank 2, and a handful of Rank 3 monsters that were running alongside it immediately turned into stone statues, reminiscent of a wall, which blocked those who were running behind them. Roars, screeches, and howls of anger spread in the surroundings as the monsters toppled over each other. Those at the front were trampled by those at the back, creating a domino effect that disrupted their retreat. The Wolf King unleashed a powerful shockwave and instantly annihilated the monsters who had tried to block their path. However, the dead monsters turned into a black, poisonous mist, which was the combination of Tiona's Death Kiss and the Blood Wolf's Blood Mist ability. These two abilities combined created a poisonous blood cloud that could poison any living thing, including the Wolf King. Although the poison did not show any immediate effect due to how strong it was actually weakening the Wolf King slowly, making it less effective in combat until its body functions shut down. Unfortunately, not everyone was as strong as the Wolf King. The Rank 1 and Rank 2 monsters immediately collapsed, and writhed on the ground due to the poisonous cloud. Rank 3 and above were able to tolerate it, but it would soon take effect on them. Run, the Wolf King ordered. Those who are left behind will die. So run. with the poisonous cloud and the petrified monsters serving as road hurdles to the fleeting army. The retreat of the Wolf King's forces wasn't making smooth progress. Tiona, who was watching from 3 miles away, summoned the Black Flag a second time and once again called for her monster army. After summoning them, she hastily retreated to the next checkpoint to whittle down the Wolf King's forces. She would repeat this process 4 more times before leaving the battlefield completely. The members of the immortal parade of 100 demons could die 10 times a day. After that, they would enter a 2-day cooldown before they could be summoned again. 13 told her that he would need half of the flag's lives to wrap things up, so Tiona was only allowed to have her subordinates die 5 times. The Alpha team, who saw the chaos that was happening on the ground, weren't surprised by the sudden change in the battlefield. Their supreme commander had informed them that there would be monster rebels who would hinder the enemy forces and that the allied armies should treat these monsters as friendlies. While everything was a mess above ground, the dying broodmother glared hatefully at the centipede king, who was deliberately eating its body slowly, savoring the anger, disbelief, humiliation, and unwillingness that its former comrade was feeling. "You won't get away with this, Jalrog," the brood mother screeched. "You will die a dog's death." "I won't," Jalrog replied. "I will eat you, then that stupid wolf. After that, the stupid wyvern will be next. Once I've devoured the 3 of you, that death lord is as good as dead. The earth dragons will be a pain to deal with, but I'm not worried. I have a helper after all." The brood mother, Nizana, screamed in pain as the centipede king tore off its last remaining leg from its body and ate it with gusto. "The master will avenge me," Nizana shouted, using the last embers of its life to curse at its killer. "A traitor like you will die a dog's death." The centipede laughed out loud after hearing the broodmother's hateful words. "Don't worry," Jalrog said. "The moment your master crosses into this world, I will send him to the same place where you will soon be." The centipede king no longer played with its food and sliced off the broodmother's head from its body. It then greedily devoured Nizana's body, as well as its core, making it feel a surge of strength wash over its body. While the centipede king was enjoying the euphoric sensation of increasing its strength, Rocky appeared before it and gave its report. "The Wolf King is retreating to the southeast," Rocky reported. "Understood," Jalrog replied. "I'll be there shortly." Rocky nodded and left the scene, not wanting to stay even a second longer with the traitorous monster who had sold its comrades for power. A minute later, Jalrog's exoskeleton became completely black. Its body was transforming into a more powerful version of itself. Faint golden hues emerged on its razor-sharp legs, making it look deadlier than it already was. When its transformation was over, Jalrog dug into the ground and headed southeast. Its centipede army followed behind it like a tide, ready to devour the fools who had mocked their king's pursuit of power, which they would pay for dearly with their lives. This, just how? The Grand Marshal of the central government, Lawrence, looked at the monitors in disbelief as he watched tens of thousands of monsters under the Wolf King's army die at a rapid rate. At first, it wasn't noticeable due to how numerous they were. But soon, the flying drones, which were closely monitoring the battlefield and were following these monsters from the sky, noticed that the monsters were decreasing at a rapid rate. Of course, the Alpha team, who were responsible for sniping them from the sky, played a role in diminishing the low-ranking monsters. However, even they couldn't achieve what was happening right before their eyes. Since the military drones were flying at the rear of the monster army, they couldn't see Tiona's team decimating the monsters from the front. Although they were rank 1 monsters, the number of abilities in their arsenal was fearsome. Their petrification breath turned the monsters at the front into stone statues, making them a hurdle that caused the monster stampede to trample against each other. Those who were running at the front weren't able to stop on time. The monsters at the back would collide with them, and the cycle would repeat, causing countless loss of lives among their ranks as the bigger and stronger monsters stomped over their bodies. The worst part was that when someone from Tiona's army was killed, they would explode into a poisonous blood mist that would spread in the surroundings, latching onto the monster army and killing the weaker monsters among their ranks. Those who were lucky to survive would manage to run a bit more before once again facing the same thing all over again, stacking the effect of the poison. Since they were running, the blood of the monsters was pumping very quickly inside their bodies. This allowed Tiona's poison to travel faster and attack them from the inside. Those who reached their limit would later collapse or slow down considerably, allowing the Alpha team, who were attacking them from the sky, to finish them off quickly. Renz, who was also observing the monitors with a critical gaze, could tell that something was happening that he wasn't aware of. However, he soon noticed something that wasn't obvious at first, but became more apparent as time went on. The Alpha team is hurting the monsters to run in a certain direction, Renz thought. If my guess is right, this has something to do with the monster rebels that Zion previously mentioned. Maybe they are thinning the enemy's ranks from the front. Since the military drone couldn't fly faster than the monsters could run, Renz and those who had reached the same conclusion couldn't confirm their guesses. The strategist's gaze then landed on the teenage boy, who would tap on the projection on the table to guide the army, and occasionally on his communicator to give out secret orders that others could neither notice nor understand. Perhaps noticing his gaze, 13 smiled faintly and asked Renz a question. However, before asking that question, he accidentally turned on his communicator, which connected him to all the wanderers and military personnel who were participating in this mission. Do you know why the jinns and magents were able to invade Pangea when they first appeared in this world? 13 asked. It's because the strongest weapons of humanity didn't work on them, Renz replied. 13 nodded. That's right. The guns, assault rifles, missiles, as well as the nuclear weapons that mankind developed ceased to function. The laws of the world were rewritten, banning the use of these weapons. Because of this, humanity had to rely on the Wanderers to fight their battles for them. Unfortunately, the Wanderers back then were simply too weak to make a difference. But as time went on, the Wanderers gained more strength, and humanity was also able to create new and effective weapons against the jinns and magents. However, that wasn't enough. The most important thing humanity lost many years ago was their confidence. So, the battle we are having now is to reclaim that lost confidence. Everyone heard their Supreme Commander's words loud and clear, making them feel pride and courage rise in their hearts. But 13 was still not done. I want everyone to do everything in their power, so that when morning comes, the flag of victory will flutter in the northern regions of this continent. 13 said with determination, further fanning the flames of courage that were now blazing brightly in everyone's hearts. For Pangea! For Pangea! Everyone in the command center shouted, and those who were listening also shouted their agreement. The Alpha team became more aggressive in their attacks and rained down bombardments on the fleeting wolf army without any shred of mercy. Tiona, who had used the flag for the 5th time, immediately left the scene to go to the place where her master asked her to go. Her mission had ended, and with this, more than half of the monster army had been poisoned to death or were currently suffering from its effects. 13 once again tapped his communicator, and a close-up view of the terrain that was viewed from space appeared in his vision. He was the only one who could see this because he was using Athena to monitor the movements of the Wyvern King and the Death Lord, who were rushing to reinforce their comrades. A faint smile appeared on the boy's lips before giving out his order. Alpha Team, the Wyvern King's army will engage you in 20 minutes, 13 stated. Execute Operation Big Bang. Yes, sir. The captains, who were leading all the squads, prepared their practice maneuver against the strongest aerial forces of the jinns and magents. Lord Wendell, Lord Lawrence, and Lord Trevor, please prepare to sortie, 13 ordered. Everyone needs you on the battlefield. The 3 monarchs, who were waiting at the Valenport, summoned their flying mounts and rose to the sky. Their role was to fend off the Wyvern King, the strongest flying monster in the Rigel continent. As long as it was kept in check, the other thrones, who were part of the Omega team, would also move out and support them from the ground. Now that the major threats on land had been cleared, it was now time for them to join the battlefield as well. Omega team, advance. 13 ordered. The three thrones of the Dvalin Federation, Ronald Rhodes, Hugo Riggs, and Spencer Nightshade, also gave the order to advance, leading their armies to battle. "Advance!" Ronald shouted. "It's time to get some action, boys." Yeah, thousands of Humvees moved forward, followed by tens of thousands of soldiers on the ground. Earlier, all of them were feeling anxious because they didn't know if they would be able to survive the battle or not. But now, they were itching for a fight and wished to join their brothers and sisters on the front lines who were having all the action for themselves. "To the naval fleet. Are all of you ready?" 13 asked. "Sir, yes, sir." "Good," 13 replied. "Remember the coordinates I gave earlier. All of you will concentrate your firepower in that direction." Since the main bulk of the enemy's forces were about to meet up with the Wolf King, it was only a matter of time before they regrouped for a counterattack. However, this was also the thing that 13 was waiting for. He had cast the dice, and whether it would be a winning throw or not would only be known when the Wyvern King finally entered the battlefield. Jalrog, Nizana, and Aram should have dealt with those puny humans by now. The Wyvern King, Vanaroth, thought as he led his mighty army to join its comrades on the battlefield. Knowing that it was the strongest among the kings in the Rigel continent, it looked down on Zed and Amos, who had lost to the humans. As for Evavug, it assumed that the brain beetle had perished because of Jalrog's betrayal. Even so, it confidently thought that the moment his army joined the battle, the humans would no longer dare to step foot in the Rigel continent again. However, while they were flying toward the meeting point, hundreds of flying monsters, which belonged to Zed's army, appeared in their vision. Most of these monsters were suffering from various levels of injuries, the sight of which made the Wyvern King frown. "What are you all doing here?" Vanaroth asked. "What is happening on the front lines?" A rank 5 giant hawk, who was leading its brethren, answered. "The humans have overpowered us in battle. Queen Azana had also been seriously injured, and I believe that she had perished in their hands by now. The Wolf King's army, on the other hand, was being attacked from the sky, so they had no choice but to retreat as well. The Centipede King's army might have also perished alongside the Spider Queen, and Lord Jalrog is nowhere to be found." "Useless imbeciles," Vanaroth roared in anger. "All of you will come with me and rejoin the battle. If you don't, we will kill all of you, right here, right now. What is your answer?" The Wyvern unleashed a pressure that made the flying monsters that belonged to Zed's army almost fall off from the sky due to how strong it was. Those who were seriously injured even lost their ability to fly and crashed to the ground, dying from falling at such a great height. The giant hawk and those who were still able to fly had no choice but to agree to join the Wyvern King's army, knowing that they'd perish in their hands otherwise. "Increase your flight speed," Vanaroth ordered. "We will show those puny humans their place." Roars and screeches of approval spread in the sky as the Wyvern King led the charge towards the north with its eyes burning in determination. "Alpha Team, the Wyvern King's army will engage you in 20 minutes. Execute Operation Big Bang." "Yes, sir," Christopher and the other captains replied and went into the Big Bang formation. "Remember, we will not engage the Wyvern King directly," Christopher stated. "We will keep our distance. It is not our role to fight against him. Do I make myself clear?" "Yes, sir." A few minutes later, the Alpha Team noticed that the sky beyond the horizon had darkened. Countless black specks could be seen in the distance, as if a swarm of bats was about to head in their direction. Christopher and the Alpha Team slowed down their pursuit of the Wolf King's army and slowly descended from the sky. They were not going to retreat completely. Their plan was to bait the arrogant Wyvern King's army to charge in their direction and engage them in battle. The three monarchs had also arrived at the scene, hovering just a few meters above the Alpha Team's formation, serving as their sword and shield against the strongest king in the Rigel continent. When Vanaroth saw the Wolf King's army that now only numbered in the thousands, it roared in anger as if asking the Wolf King to explain itself. However, Aram ignored it and continued to retreat with the survivors of its army. "Cowards!" Vanaroth shouted before it increased its speed to charge fearlessly at the wanderers in front of it. The Wyvern King's army, which numbered in the tens of thousands, followed behind their king in preparation to annihilate their enemies. "Commander, The enemies have already entered our range, one of the officers in the command center reported. All missiles launch. 13 ordered. Far out into the sea, the warships unleashed countless long-range missiles towards the continent. The Dvalin port, which had also been modified to become a floating fortress, also fired their missiles on the coordinates that their supreme commander had given them. The Alpha Team, as well as the Monarchs, watched as countless missiles trailed above their heads and charged at the army that was headed in their direction. Soon, a thunderous explosion reverberated across the sky as countless flying monsters got caught up in the powerful explosions around them and fell to their deaths. Alpha Team, retreat, 13 ordered. Monarchs, serve as the rear guard and make sure that the Wyvern King doesn't break through your defenses. Yes, the Alpha Team hastily retreated because their flying mounts wouldn't last long in fighting against the Wyvern King's army because their mounts were already exhausted. They would need to rest for a while before they could once again effectively engage their enemies in battle. 13 knew this as well, so he asked the naval fleet to create a killing zone that would deter the Wyvern King's army from flying to their deaths. The Alpha Team would land near the beach to rest, while the Omega Team would also provide support fire from the ground. While this was happening on the front lines, the Wolf King and its army thought that they were finally safe. But just before they could even catch their breath, the ground under their feet trembled as if there was an earthquake. A few seconds later, countless giant centipedes emerged from the ground and attacked their exhausted comrades who had just escaped from being hunted to death by the Wanderers. Jalrog, you traitor! Aram shouted in anger as it tried to lunge at the centipede king who had appeared in front of it. Jalrog didn't back down and clashed with the Wolf King. Their first exchange sent the Wolf King skidding several meters backward, making its eyes widen in shock. It had fought the Centipede King in the past out of boredom, and in every one of those battles, it had always emerged victorious. Seeing the Wolf King's shocked expression, a sneer appeared on Jalrog's face. It had long waited to see this kind of look from its comrade. You've grown stronger, Aram growled. Not only did I grow stronger, but you've also grown weaker, Aram, Jalrog replied. You will not get away with this, you traitor. Aram roared in anger. Nizana said the same. Jalrog commented, but where do you think she is now? The Wolf Kings first stood on end like sharp needles ready to stab its foe to death. I'll kill you, Aram shouted as a shockwave burst outward from its body. The Wolf King could control the wind element, making its attacks sharper and its movements faster. Although it felt a bit sluggish due to the poison inside its body, it was still faster than the Centipede King in its current state, giving it the confidence to win this battle between them. Jalrog knew that Aram wasn't an easy opponent, so it decided to fight seriously as well. All of its legs transformed into razor-sharp blades that were as red as blood. While the two kings were having a face-off, their forces were busy killing each other in the background. However, the one gaining the upper hand was none other than the Centipede King's army, who was at their peak performance. Unlike the exhausted monsters of the Wolf King's army, they had preserved their strength, so they were able to overpower their enemies in a heartbeat. Aram knew this as well, so it planned to defeat its enemy at the fastest time possible. Channeling all of its strength in its legs, the Wolf King charged at the Centipede King in an attack that was faster than what its eye could see. However, for a split second, when it was only a few meters away from its target, its front feet momentarily froze, stopping its momentum. Jalrog didn't miss this opportunity and hacked the Wolf King's neck, intending to sever its head from its body. But due to its incredible speed and reaction time, the Wolf King managed to twist its body at the last second, preventing the Centipede King from landing a killing blow. However, it didn't escape unscathed. One of Jalrog's bladed legs slashed on its eye, drawing blood. Aram immediately backed away, losing its left eye on that one exchange. As blood flowed from its injury, the Wolf King extended its senses to pay closer attention to its surroundings. It then sensed a group of monsters that numbered more than 100, hiding using camouflage. Tiona had met up with Jalrog in order to help the Centipede King fight against the Wolf King. Earlier, when the two kings were about to clash, Tiona's forces collectively used the telekinesis spell and targeted the Wolf King's right foot. Since the Wolf King was stronger than them, their telekinesis wasn't strong enough to hold it completely in place. Knowing this, Tiona ordered her troops to target Aram's right foot, preventing it from effectively charging at the Centipede King. Although they only managed to hold the Wolf King for only 2 seconds, those 2 seconds were very crucial in a battle between kings, allowing the Centipede King to draw first blood and blind one of its opponent's eyes. You pests! Aram had reached the limit of its patience because this wasn't the first time it had encountered the pesky creatures who had made its and its army's life miserable during their escape. No matter how many times it had killed these weak monsters, they would appear again and again, almost driving the Wolf King crazy. And now, during its fight against a very dangerous opponent, these monsters once again appear to torment it, making the Wolf King consider retreating while it still could. Thinking of escaping, Jalrog sneered. Don't even dare. This is where you will die, Aram. Go and accompany Nizana in the afterlife. In your dreams, Jalrog. The Wolf King no longer hesitated and ran away from the battlefield, leaving his army behind. But before it could run away completely, the ground under its feet gave way once more, trapping it in a sinkhole and making it fall into the trap that Rocky and Jalrog had prepared for its arrival. Since it had decided to betray its comrades, the Centipede King wouldn't allow the Wolf King to escape and warn the Wyvern King, the Death Lord, and the Earth Dragons that he had joined hands with their enemies, in order to consume them all. Jalrog crawled into the sinkhole, blocking the Wolf King's escape route as it fell down hundreds of meters deep under the ground. Tiona's army followed behind the Centipede King because they were its insurance to make sure that the Wolf King would never emerge from the grave that they had painstakingly prepared for its arrival. Vanaroth shared a similar trait with Amos. Both of them were confident in their strength. But unlike the Wyvern King, the Manticore King didn't look down on humans. This was why Arthur decided to unequip Kamisat's armor, which would have made the throne nearly invincible back when he had fought against it. Arthur had felt Amos' conviction, so he decided to face him with that same level of determination. Relying on the armor wasn't his style, so the two fought with their lives on the lines until Arthur emerged victorious. Even in his dying moments, Amos didn't have any regrets. He had died fighting against someone who shared the same belief as him. For him, such death was honorable. However, Vanaroth was different. He was arrogant and never thought of humans as a force who could defeat them. The previous attempts of the Wanderers to reclaim the Rigel continent only solidified his impression of the human race. But that was in the past. Back then, they didn't have someone like 13 calling the shots. And the Wyvern King, who was still thinking of its former glory, found itself being pushed back by a bombardment that it had never experienced in its lifetime. 13 had created a killing zone, where the entire naval allied fleet was throwing everything they got at the coordinates that the teenage boy had told them. Because of this, regardless of rank, none of the monsters were able to move unscathed. After all, they were facing off against the modern weapons that the Dvalin Federation had developed for this moment. Ever since they had secured the 12 sectors in the north of the continent, the Dvalin Federation didn't stop creating weapons that were effective against flying monsters. Why? Because they had been fighting Zed's army for several years. They focused on this branch of weaponry. As much as the Wyvern King wanted to annihilate his foes, there were 3 monarchs standing in his way, preventing him from touching the Alpha Team, who were busy retreating. 13 had aimed the missiles at the Wyvern King's army, while the 3 monarchs dealt with the leader. Although Vanaroth was strong, fighting against 3 monarchs wasn't an easy task, especially with Lawrence serving as the main offense. Wendell wasn't really a combat-oriented wanderer. He was an all-rounder, specializing in support, defense, and average damage. Trevor Remington, on the other hand, was a full support, similar to a cleric. His role was to buff his allies and heal them in battle. Since the 3 were working together with the intention of winning, the one being pushed back was none other than the Wyvern King, who was getting more and more frustrated with each passing second. The barrage concentrated on the Wyvern King's army prevented them from joining their leader in battle, which allowed the monarchs to hold him back. Suddenly, there was a gap that opened in the killing zone because the naval forces were running low on missiles. Through that gap, dozens of flying monsters passed through and headed to their king, intending to help it in battle. But just before they could join the fray, a loud shout reverberated from the ground. Death! Death! The Omega team, which was led by the Thrones, had arrived at the scene. All the Humvees, which were equipped with turret-mounted machine guns, roared to life and attacked the monsters that had managed to break through to the killing zone. The Wanderers, who had long-distance sniping abilities, also helped shoot down the enemies, creating a second killing zone, which made Vanneroth roar in anger. "I'll kill all of you," Vanneroth shouted as he opened its mouth to unleash a dragon breath aimed at the people on the ground. "Not on my watch." Lawrence teleported under the dragon's jaws and forcefully swung his hammer upwards, making the Wyvern King's dragon breath explode in its mouth. Molten blood rained from the sky as Vanneroth roared in anger out of pain from its injury. Lawrence was a wanderer with 3 known abilities: rebirth, telekinesis, and clone. He was able to fly any time he wanted with his telekinesis, so even without a mount, he could fight against the Wyvern King evenly. However, he and his silver dragon had great synergy, so both of them tag-teamed to attack the Wyvern King, who had momentarily lost its composure. Wendell also didn't miss this chance and swiftly unleashed his mid-range water spears to pierce through the Wyvern's scales. Trevor also joined the fray. He cast his strongest defensive ability, Holy Lance, and targeted the Wyvern King's jaw, which was bleeding after the monster's own attack backfired on it. For the first time since it had arrived in Pangea, Vanneroth felt the fear of death as the attacks of the 3 monarchs landed on its body. At this moment, it realized something it should have thought of before. The battle now was far too different from the battles in the past. Back then, the 8 kings were complete, and because of their combined strength and sheer number of subordinates, the Wanderers were unable to retake their lands. But now, this battle started with 3 of the kings no longer around. Zed, Amos, and Evavug played their roles, and they played them effectively. The Birdman and the Manticore King ruled the skies alongside Vanneroth, while Jalrog, Amir, Nizana, Erasmus, and Evavug terrorized them on the ground. With the Earth Dragons backing them as well, they were truly unbeatable. But now, those same monsters were nowhere to be seen. He was alone. He was fighting alone against the allied armies of humanity, and this woke him up from reality. The Wyvern King was unable to fight the world alone. "Retreat!" Vanneroth roared as it flapped its wings desperately in order to escape. But just as it had distanced itself from the monarchs, a lone missile descended from the sky and hit its back directly. A blinding flash of light spread across the heavens as both wanderers and monsters reflexively averted their gaze from the explosion that sent a shockwave blasting outward, pushing the monarchs, as well as the flying monsters, away from the point of impact. 13, who was sitting comfortably in the command center, tapped the projection on the table and sneered. "Checkmate." Vanneroth's giant body fell from the sky. Its scales were all shattered, and its body was bleeding profusely. But just as it was about to crash on the ground, it flapped its wings desperately, preventing a lethal fall. It then used every bit of strength that was left on its body to fly to its army, using them as cover to protect itself. Although they knew that protecting their leader was suicide, all the flying monsters advanced with determination. The monarchs wanted to finish off Vanneroth, but they also knew that they would be in danger if they faced thousands of flying monsters that were dead set on blocking their path. At that moment, a familiar voice sounded from their communicators. "Hold your ground and support the Omega team," 13 ordered. "But Zion, the Wyvern King, is on its last legs." Wendell replied, "We just need to push a little more, and he will die." The monarch of the Dvalin Federation was unwilling to let the Wyvern King go. If they managed to kill it, they would be one step closer to liberating the northern regions of the continent. "It doesn't matter if it escapes," 13 replied. "Follow my instructions and support our ground forces. We are so close to winning. Don't throw it away just because you're unable to control your emotions. All you need to do is listen to what I say, and I will give you the victory you have been yearning for all these years." But if you really wish to deal with the Wyvern King, then go ahead and do it. I'll wash my hands and let you take responsibility for the countless lives that will be lost because of your stupidity." Everyone in the command center turned to look at their supreme commander anxiously. No one in the world dared to call Monarch stupid. Those who did had already died a dog's death. With this in mind, they couldn't help but tremble. Their supreme commander didn't even bat an eye when he said such a thing to the monarch of the Dvalin Federation. Renz, on the other hand, only smirked after hearing 13's words. He had the same thoughts as the teenage boy. If his brother really went after the Wyvern King, instead of holding their ground, that would definitely go down in history as the reason why this mission failed. Wendell clenched his fists and took a few deep breaths in order to calm his emotions. "Boy, you really don't know how to hold back, huh?" Wendell said in an icy tone. "Are you not afraid that I won't pinch you to death after this mission ends?" "I'm not afraid of incompetent people," 13 replied. "If you can really do that, then go ahead. It will be your funeral, though." Benedict, who was on the special line used by monarchs, thrones, and the commanders of the expedition, couldn't help but suck a breath of air. "Although I hate Arthur, this grandson of his is right down my alley," Benedict muttered. "Good thing my granddaughter, Leah, is of the same age as him. I better lay down the plans now, while there's still time." The thrones of the Dvalin Federation, who was right beside him, couldn't help but think the same way. If they had someone like Zion in their family tree, then they could die happy, knowing that their bloodline would prosper for years to come. Lawrence patted Wendell's shoulder in order to help calm him down. "The boy is right," Lawrence said. "Running after the Wyvern King now is not worth it. We need to prioritize our people's safety." Wendell took a deep breath before nodding his head. "I know. Hot blood just got into my head a while ago," Wendell replied. "That commander of yours is really fearless. If not for the fact that the operation is going smoothly, I would have definitely given him a good nagging." Lawrence only chuckled before flying toward his silver dragon. "As long as you don't smack his head and beat him up, you are free to give him a good nagging," Lawrence stated. "Right now, we need that brain of his, so make sure that it won't be damaged. We have Trevor here. I'm sure he can heal that kid easily, can't he?" Wendell glanced at his friend, who only responded with a faint smile. "Don't risk it," Trevor replied. "Just like what the Grand Marshal said, we can't afford to damage Zion's brain right now. But enough talk. They're coming. Get into position." "Good." Wendell raised his trident and summoned countless water spears above his head. "I'll vent out my anger on these bastards." With the three monarchs and the thrones protecting their ground forces from the flying monsters, the most the army had suffered were moderate injuries. None of the injuries were fatal, and all the injured were hurriedly taken back to the rear, where the 69th Battalion and the medics tended to their injuries. While his army was dying to allow him to escape, Vanneroth flew desperately as his blood dripped on the ground ceaselessly. With its severe injuries, its flight was erratic. But after flying for nearly 20 miles away from the front lines, its body finally gave in and crashed on the ground. "I can't die here." Vanneroth tried to prop itself up from the ground. "I can't die in this place." It had lofty ambitions of breaking through to the next rank and becoming a rank 9 sovereign. Even if it had to crawl, it would do everything in its power to escape. At that moment, it saw something moving in its direction. Due to its injuries, its sight was also blurry, so it was unable to identify whether the newcomer was a friend or foe. The Wyvern King no longer had the strength to fight, so it did the only thing it could do, and that was to look at whoever was coming. "Has the front lines been broken?" A familiar voice reached the Wyvern King's ears, making it sigh in relief. "Erasmus, it's you." Vanneroth felt as if it had finally gained salvation after hearing the Death Lord's voice. "It is indeed I," Erasmus replied. "Now, tell me what happened on the battlefield." The Wyvern King nodded and narrated everything that happened. From the news of Nizana's death to Aram's escape, as well as its defeat against the Wanderer army, the Wyvern King said it all. "We can't beat them by ourselves," Vanneroth said. "We need to retreat to where the Earth Dragons are. As long as we regroup with them, we will be able to think of a plan on how to handle this situation." Erasmus nodded. "You're right. I'll take it from here. You can now rest." The Wyvern King, who thought that the Death Lord would carry its body back to safety, suddenly felt a searing pain in its chest. "Why?" Vanaroth asked in disbelief. "It's because you're no longer needed," Erasmus replied as it pushed his death blade deeper, making the Wyvern King scream in pain. A few seconds later, it collapsed on the ground, its blood dyeing the surroundings red. The proud and arrogant Wyvern King died an unwilling death, and its eyes slowly lost their luster. When its heart finally stopped beating, the Death Lord placed its hand on Vanaroth's head and chanted, "Arise." A few seconds later, the Wyvern King rose up from the ground and roared loudly. The Death Lord jumped on its back with the intention of using its former comrade as its mount. Erasmus glanced in the direction of the battlefield, where countless flashes of light illuminated the dark, cloudy sky. "Go," Erasmus ordered. The undead Wyvern King flapped its tattered wings and rose toward the sky. It didn't fly in the direction of the battlefield. Instead, it flew in the opposite direction, intending to regroup with its undead army. Fighting against the Wanderers at this point in time was a foolish move, so it decided to order its army to retreat and return to the center of the continent, where the Earth Dragons were currently at. 1707. Deep underground. The Wolf King fought tooth and nail against the Centipede King, but it was at a great disadvantage. It relied heavily on its speed, but since the underground tunnels were cramped, it had no choice but to fight with a disadvantage against Jalrog in order to return to surface. Unfortunately, that was easier said than done. Aram literally had its back against the wall. As its injuries increased, its movements became a lot slower. "Jalrog, what's the point of fighting against each other?" Aram shouted in desperation. "We are allies. Have you really betrayed our master?" "Betrayed our master?" Jalrog sneered. "I never recognized that person as my master. Because of him, I was forced into this godforsaken place. But I guess I still need to thank him. Thanks to him, I will finally be able to achieve my goals out of his reach. Thank you, Aram. Because of you, I will grow stronger. You and Nizana finally became useful for once. Damn you, arrogant insect!" Aram roared as its entire body glowed in a greenish light. "Since you wish to kill me, let's die together." The Wolf King finally decided to burn its own life force in order to bring the traitor with him to the other life. However, Jalrog, who had already consumed the broodmother, didn't back down and clashed against the Wolf King. It coiled its body around Aram's body and dug its razor-sharp legs into it, drawing blood. Aram ignored its injuries and bit down on Jalrog's neck, drawing blood as well. Tiona's army used that opportunity to lunge at the two Beast Kings and detonate themselves, creating a blood mist that engulfed both of their bodies. Jalrog sensed that the blood mist was poisonous, but instead of being afraid, it only laughed in its heart. It had a very strong resistance against poison, so it wasn't worried in the slightest. In fact, it even thanked the sacrifice of its allies. Thanks to them, not only would the poison kill the Wolf King faster, but it would also allow him to leave the battlefield while it still could. 5 minutes later, the Wolf King's strength finally gave in, allowing the Centipede King to overpower it. "Goodbye, Aram," Jalrog said as it bit on the Wolf King's neck. "Send my regards to Nizana in the afterlife." The Wolf King, who no longer had the strength to resist, finally died. Jalrog didn't hesitate to devour the Wolf King's body, tearing its flesh and drinking its blood. Tiona, who saw everything from start to finish, slithered away and regrouped with Rocky. She had fulfilled her duty well, and it was now time for her to return to her master's side. 13, who had been watching the battle unfold through Tiona's eyes, yawned briefly before taking a sip from the hot chocolate that was served to him a minute ago. "Sir, all the enemies are retreating," one of the staff reported as tears streamed down the side of his face. "We are victorious. We won." The officer had lost his family when the Jinns and Magians invaded the Rigel continent. Because of this, he decided to dedicate his life to fighting against them. His only wish was to return to his hometown, where he would properly erect a grave for his family. "Sir, please sound the horns of victory," 13 replied with a smile. "I'll give you the honor of informing the world that we have won." "Yes, sir." The officer saluted. All the officers in the command center all stood up in unison and saluted their supreme commander before clapping their hands. A few seconds later, a loud horn reverberated from the Dvalin port, passing through the speakers within the Allied army, which reached even the front lines. When the soldiers heard this, all of them shouted in joy and erupted in cheers. "We have won!" the battlefield reporter shouted as tears streamed down his face. "Are you all seeing this? We have won! The horn of victory has been blown. We have reclaimed the north of the Rigel continent." From all over the world, sounds of cheering spread in every household. Even in the distant Aldebaran and Signy continent, everyone was shouting in joy, spreading the good news to every corner of the world. They really did it. Douglas Griffin laughed out loud after hearing the shouts of the people in his own command center. Although there was still the threat of the other surviving kings and the 3 Earth Dragons, it didn't stop everyone from celebrating. 13, who could hear the loud shouts from the window of his command center, smiled as he stood up. He then walked past Renz and patted the latter's waist. "I'll wait to hear your answer until tomorrow," 13 replied. "I hope you make the right decision." After saying those words, 13 left the command center in order to join his subordinates, who were busy treating the injured in the battle that had just ended. Renz looked at the teenager's back and chuckled internally. Zion had asked him to become his loyal subordinate who would serve as his double agent for the Dvalin Federation. The thought of acting as a spy for his own organization was something that hadn't crossed Renz's mind before. But now, after seeing 13's meticulous preparations, he felt that siding with him would bring him more benefits in the long run. "I just hope he isn't a devil in disguise," Renz thought as he shifted his gaze at the monitors, which were showing the soldiers on the battlefield, who were still celebrating their victory over the Djinns and Magians. The strategist of the Dvalin Federation knew that Zion didn't think that this was a hard battle. He had observed how composed the teenage boy was from start to finish, and he couldn't help but think that everyone, whether they be Djinns or Wanderers, was just dancing at the palm of his hands. Shauna, who was tending to the wounded, noticed that the injured soldiers were smiling despite the pain that they were feeling. She could feel it in her surroundings. She could taste it in the air. This feeling of joy and jubilation was very infectious, making even her feel like humming as she treated the injured. Suddenly, she saw a familiar teenage boy walking toward the 69th Battalion, looking like he had just woken up from his sleep. 13 was yawning, and yet everyone who saw him was still looking at him like he was their hero. After all, no matter what he looked like, he was still the one who had shown them the path to victory. One by one, the soldiers he passed through saluted him, but Zion Levinas only waved his hand, telling them that everyone was exempted from saluting him right now. However, that didn't stop them from paying their respects. They still saluted him despite him telling them not to do it. At that moment, a giggle escaped Shauna's lips as she raised her hand to playfully salute Zion, who was about to walk past her. Seeing her salute him, 13 sighed before lightly patting Shauna's head as he walked past her. "You did well, Shauna." 13's playful words reached the young lady's ears, making her pure and innocent heart skip a beat.